Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And today is a day about Path of Exile. You're going to find out a lot of awesome stuff we've been working on. Before we get started though, I wanted to mention that there are Twitch drops that you can win. Below the live stream there are some instructions for signing up and linking your Twitch account with your Path of Exile account, and if you do that, you'll be eligible to receive the drops. So today's live stream has got 4 sections. They say you should start your show with a bang, so we're going to start right off with Path of Exile 2. After that, we're going to show you Path of Exile Ultimatum. This is an expansion for regular Path of Exile that's coming out literally next week. After that, we're going to be joined by Ziggy, who's going to host a Q&A where he asks me a whole bunch of questions from Twitch chat. So if you have any questions about the various reveals, make sure to keep them for the Q&A. Then there's going to be a live episode of the Bay Class podcast where Take Cat and his crew of Path of Exile veterans are going to discuss all of the things we've announced today. They'll be joined by Rory Rackham, who's the Grinding Gear Games developer who was in charge of the development of the Ultimatum League. Alright, let's get started. You're probably wondering, why has it been so long since we last showed you any Path of Exile 2 footage? And honestly, this is because the project is so important to us that we are definitely taking our time to make sure that we make the best possible action RPG. Let's watch a new trailer.
Doufám, že bude něco víc než jenom příběh. Ale bojím se, že bude jenom příběh.
Evil grows once more. The seed of corruption advances, spreading dread and despair.
Ty města na kolech to už jsme viděli.
Must give chase.
No, to byl ten. Jsou tady kuše a oštěpy. Zase taky nějaký nový skill. Monstři. Další nový monstři. To je pár. Terakotová armáda. To je pár. Je to technik.
3,000 years of dormant malevolence. We must hunt down the seed and put an end to this madness.
Vypadá jak nějaký hype. Nějaká velká boss arena. Podle toho týpka, to je nějaký nový map boss, který už byl. To je nějaký nový boss. Vypadá to nádherně. Okay. No, dozvěděli jsme se prd, kromě toho, že je to pěkný. Nevím, jestli kuše byly potvrzený předtím nebo ne. Každopádně ty tady už byly.
That trailer really shows what we have achieved with Path of Exile 2. I am so proud of the efforts of the entire team in putting that together. At ExileCon, we announced that Path of Exile 2 is a true sequel to Path of Exile. So that means a new 7-act campaign, it means a whole new skill gem system, new items, new monsters, character classes, all the Ascendancy classes are completely new, it's got cutting-edge next-generation graphics as you just saw. Basically, it's everything you would expect from a sequel to Path of Exile. But we're not just throwing away our legacy, we're embracing it. Both campaigns will be fully playable from within the same game plan. You'll be able to play through the original Path of Exile storyline or the new Path of Exile 2 campaign on the way to the shared endgame. All of your old characters will still be playable, and of course, any microtransaction purchases you've made in Path of Exile will carry on to the sequel. At ExileCon, we introduced the dark forests of the island of Ogum, where you start your journey. Today, we're proud to showcase Path of Exile 2's second act, which takes place in the Vastiri Desert. Welcome to Path of Exile 2's second act. As you saw in the trailer, Act 2 is centered around a caravan of Marraketh called the Ardura who live in the Vastiri Desert. You're chasing another caravan from an opposing tribe called the Faradun. There's a set of large ancient gates blocking the progress of the caravan through a desert pass, so you're being sent through the Traitor's Passage to unlock them.
We shall wait here, Jingak. But the military carts have departed.
Přímě řečeno, já ani nevím, jestli se chci spojovat ten příběh.
Path of Exile 2 is a lot more than just new acts. We want combat to feel both brutal and responsive, even at low levels. We're ensuring that each weapon type has unique and different mechanics. Each weapon class feels different to play, and today we're going to start by demonstrating the new Spear weapon class. Spears are a weapon class favoring mobility with both melee and ranged attack options. To that end, each spear will grant you at least one mobility skill. In this case, the spear comes with both an engage and disengage skill. When you engage, it increases your melee damage for a short time, and that really encourages you to be mobile during combat.
So, one
of the skills we're using here is called Whirling Slash. When you use Whirling Slash, it creates a sandstorm that grows in size each time you use the skill. When you leave the sandstorm, it explodes, dealing damage to nearby monsters. A great way to do that is to use the disengage skill, which makes you fly backwards and throw projectiles.
Marakethro? To existuje, nebo to je nový base?
In PoE 2, each area's mini-boss is a much more substantial fight with interesting mechanics. You'll be able to find at least one mini-boss in each area of the game. One thing I love about this boss in particular is that it destroys the ceiling when it slams the ground, letting in more light. Clever players will notice that if they're standing in the light, then they're not going to have any rocks falling on their head. The Rapid Assault skill that we're using against this boss does 3 rapid stabs, followed by a 4th stab that deals more damage and can stun, if you're willing to commit to a long attack time. While developing the skills for Path of Exile 2, we were really thinking a lot about designing skills that could be cancelled early to dodge, or you can commit to the full attack for maximum damage.
Vypadá celkem jednoduše ten souboj, že damage má hodně vysoký. Nevím, jestli to bude běžný, anebo jestli tohle je spíš overpower postava. To bude další lize? Ano, hned po tomhle tom. A na konci otázky se píše jeden otázník.
One of the skills we're using here is called Spear Field, which creates an area of spears coming out of the ground that impale monsters who walk into them, causing them to bleed. As the monsters move towards you, they take damage, so using your mobility skills as a way to move away from them is a great strategy here. In Path of Exile 2, we've invested a lot in our animation system. I'm sure you're noticing the animations are looking a lot better than they did in PoE 1. But there's also a lot of subtle detail, like characters having different run animations depending on how fast they're moving. When we use a Quicksilver Flask here, you can see the character changes to a sprinting animation.
Na to jsem se nevšiml. jsem to trošku všiml. No to je Sherryker z Delvu. Tam jsou Sherryker z Delvu. Úplně to jako Sherryker z Delvu. Je to pěkný, to si budem povídat.
Now that we've arrived at the Ancient Gates, we're going to show you another of the new weapon classes in Path of Exile 2, Crossbows. Crossbows are special in that they grant attack skills implicitly. This particular crossbow grants Power Shot, which is a high damage single target attack. In order to modify what Power Shot does, you're going to need to equip Bolt skill gems, which change the type of bolts that are loaded into the crossbow. Here we've got 3 different bolt skills that the character can switch between depending on the situation.
Armor-piercing bolts. Incendiary bolts.
Permafrost bolts can be used to disrupt packs of enemies to prevent them from closing in on your position. You can then follow up with armor-piercing bolts to do plenty of damage.
Které se budou používat s kušema, se budou jmenovat bolty, bych řekl.
In this area, we're helping Asala, leader of the Ardura, to open the Ancient Gates and let the caravan through. Because the bolt types are the skill gems, support gems that are added to them will modify whatever the skill is that you're using. Here we're going to add multiple projectiles to our Incendiary Bolt.
Incendiary bolts. Slay them all! Permafrost bolts. Armor-piercing bolts.
Dobrý, já už dávno chápu, že mohli ještě pokračovat.
Permafrost bolts. Incendiary bolts. Armor-piercing bolts.
In Path of Exile 2, we're doing a lot more interesting things with monster packs. Here you can see some of the monsters patrolling around.
To jsem si všimnul, že na to, že za stanem probíhá šílená bitva, tak oni na to vůbec nereagovali. No, to není dobrý tohle. To vypadá jak nějaký oždový kamen, co? Ale ukázka je moc dlouhá. Dávno chápu. Nepotřebuji do toho ukázky, jak to odehraju. A to byl nějaký pěkný oprus, jak to... Já si myslím, že lidi to nebude bavit, tohle to bude typický jako je teďko, že nejlepší buildy, nejhranější jsou ty, kteří se ovládají jedním tlačítkem. A ne, že budete mít uši a budete každou chvíli něco měnit. Typicky tyhle ty styly, co vyžadují mnohem víc ovládání, musí být mnohem silnější na to, aby lidi hráli.
Now we're coming to another example of a Path of Exile 2 mini-boss, Labyrinth the Impaler.
Ty mini-bossové vypadají nádherně.
Incendiary Bolts. Armor-piercing bolts.
The boss has dropped another type of crossbow, a siege crossbow. This crossbow grants the siege cascade skill. The skill is also modified depending on what type of bolts you're using.
Takže typ kuše. Zajímavý. Že typ kuše je něco jako ty balisty, co používáte. A jaký do toho dáte bolty, tak to primárně říká, co to bude dávat za element a co to bude dělat. A potom support gema má to nějakým způsobem ještě měníte. To moc tomu nevěřím. Samozřejmě, že když to bude mít velký čísla, na to lidi budou hrát a je to. Na první pohled nevím, jestli mě se to bude líbit.
You might notice that the monsters who die while burning
tam tu zvláštní fyziku kamenu?
We really want to make sure that there's a feeling that as you leave the battlefield, there's clear evidence of what combat took place there.
Jsem potichu proti byl? Vidíte myš, co? Je trošku zbytečný, jak ta ukázka je tak dlouhá. Flašky vypadají stejně. Co je tohleto za věc? To vždycky může být nějaký quest, nebo jo, takhle, ono z nich fakt z toho nějaký brouci vypadávají. Takže to asi dává smysl, že to má takový zvláštní fyzikální chování. Mimochodem, jsme zhruba rok a 3/4, nebo rok a půl od Exile, kde byl hotový akt 1. Teďko je hotový akt 2. Po roce a půl. Má to být 7 aktů. Nejdřív na konci roku 2022 to bylo vydáno. Dřív ne. Je zbytečně dlouhý.
This is the perennial king, the leader of the Faradun. His goal here is to prevent you from catching the caravan at any cost.
Jo, vidíte ten healthbar? Ten healthbar je větší, než bylo u jiného. Je to fakt. Takže blíduje. Zajímavý, jak je bossový health bar a potom nějakýho spawny mají health bar jednotlivý. Zajímavý. Já to spíš těším to do. To je jednodušší, než tady ovládat můj hlasitost. Jo takhle, to je normálně vykřičník, to je questovej čudlík, jenom oni ho asi změnili. To vypadá. Proč nám spawnují celý příběh? Já si myslím, že měli ukázat, toto je kuše, má takovýhle skilly, toto je druhá kuše, má takovýhle skilly, ale nemají ukazovat. Dobře, když chtějí ukázat nějakýho soubor s bossem, proč ne? A tohle město. To je dobrý, to je vtipný.
I am Asala, the Sekima of the Ardura. I care not where you came from, nor what caste you might have been there. All that matters is that you have shown yourself capable in battle, Jingak. Remain a friend to the Ardura, and you shall have nothing but respect from us. From what your shade has told us, the situation is dire. This Balbalic will live or die based on her usefulness.
Proč furt ukazujou rangera, jiná postava tam nebude? Myslíš si, že ten týpek schopný byl ranger? Já si nemyslím.
Ardura will decide her fate.
Když tak vykřičník drops, pokud nevíte.
You'll see the truth of my information soon enough. I ask nothing of you. Only that you do what you know is right.
One of the things we really wanted to do in Act 2 was to use the mobility of the caravan to allow the player to choose how they explore the act. Here you're given 4 options on how to proceed.
Dobrý.
There is a
příběh je větvený.
Inhabits the Mastodon Badlands. They worship the bones of those long ago beasts, and that faith has given rise to powerful tasks that can somehow call on storms and strike enemies with lightning. The king wishes to steal these objects of worship and use their lightning.
Ale to je nějaký, navíc ten obraz je zkomprimovaný na Twitch. Já předpokládám, že tohleto potom vydají i normálně na svém YouTube. A možná, že to bude ve 4K a to bude nářez. Že to zase vypadá, že je jiný tenhle ten user interface. Možná user interface je budou prodávat za jako MTXy, by mě nepřekvapilo.
Because we just got the Storm Spear skill as a quest reward, now would be a great time to switch back to spears and use some ranged abilities.
Takže že by fakt to byl ranger s tím spearem, je to možné?
Storm Spear fires a lightning projectile which splits on contact.
To jsou informace o Path of Exile 2, který přijde třeba za 2 roky.
The other skill we're using here is called Blazing Lance.
Liga, která právě probíhá skončí
v pondělí. A v pátek potom začíná nová liga. Informace o nový lize se dozvíte za pár minut. Hned potom Anton. Tohle to je zase takovej ten skeleton golem z Delvu. We've just found a unique spear. It's called Devata's Wind. This spear has an extra modifier that synergizes really well with Storm Spear. When you disengage, you get 2 additional projectiles on your projectile skills.
Je fakt zajímavý, jak speary jsou... Je takhle to... Spear je oštěp, to není kopí. Nebo je to oba. Javelin je oštěp, ne? Tak spear je kopí. Někomu oni nám budou ukazovat celý akt, nebo co? Že ještě právě no, to jsem došel. Ale tak tím pádem nechápu, proč kopie je i na dálku zbraň. Je trošičku absurdní to, že říkali, že chtějí, aby Path of Exile 2 přinesl rychlejší dostání se doma, na jednu stranu. Ale na druhou stranu říkali, že chtějí, aby Path of Exile 1 i 2 ty příběhy byly podobně dlouhý, což si odporuje navzájem. Myslím si, že když tam není ten jejich komentář, tak je to celkem o ničem, tohleto. Náhodný gameplay bez komentáře. Jo, tohle je ta postava, která je teďko podle mě mám vůbec nějaký mapy, co vypadá jak Doom. Jak se jmenuje ta nová mapa? Ještě tam máme menší variantu. Ale taky zajímají 2 health bary. Hodně zajímavé. To znamená, že můžou být souboje proti více bossů a uvidíte všechny health bary zároveň. Mohlo být zajímavý v Ibrozdrovi. To je dobrý, to se mi líbí. Další věc teda, že když hrajete proti bossům, tak tam ten health bar je vždycky. A nejen když na to máte najeto. To je super.
If you have any questions about what you just saw, we'll be doing a Q&A later on. While Path of Exile 2 definitely won't be released this year, we do have a Path of Exile expansion you can play 1 week from now. I'd like to introduce Path of Exile Ultimatum.
Path of Exile je i na konzolích. Například ten mě zajímá. Path of Exile nebude to tež. Zkouším nějaké možnosti. Jsou na tom nějaký předměty, teďko rukavice, předtím tam byla nějaká zbroj, tady nějaký pár krenci. To vypadá hodně rituálovsky, hodně podobně. Jo.
A simple ultimatum. Leave with your life and a meager reward, or risk it all for a chance at ungodly riches.
Print screen. Jsem to jenom.
For each trial you accept, the challenge grows. But fail and leave with nothing.
Jsem to stejně nesi. Ale nějaká nová věc na nás, jo? Chase of Horrors, normální, Sniper Smart, Find New Gems, Drop Pool, Lord's Labyrinth, Reward, Reward Velmoc, Reward Katalysty, Abyss Jewelry, Essence, hodně velký změny. Hodně velký. Breach, Perandus, Incursion, Dell, všechno změnili. Atlas Base typy, Agdboss, Axiry, Inkubátory, Bistiery, To bude velká změna.
Ultimate reward requires ultimate risk. Face the ultimatum.
Novej, to byl ten boss. Tak, co jsem tady viděl? Current reward. Takže tohleto si můžeme vzít, anebo...
When some people think of the Val civilization, they think of blood sacrifices, or Queen at Zeri, or lost temples in the jungle. But I think of risking your items. From Val orbs through double corruption, the whole Val or no balls meme, we had to make sure that this expansion was about the concept of risking your items to get great reward. In each area of the Ultimatum League, you'll meet the Trial Master, an emissary of a Val entity only known as Chaos. On behalf of Chaos, the Trial Master enacts trials where exiles must risk an escalating set of valuable rewards as they attempt to overcome progressively more difficult encounters. In each trial, you'll be presented with a reward, an objective, and a selection of difficulty modifiers that make the trial harder. Once you've chosen one of the modifiers, you must then complete that objective under the constraints of that modifier in order to win the promised reward. If you succeed in the challenge, the Trial Master will present you with an ultimatum. Either walk away with what you have earned so far, or risk it all to try to win additional rewards. He'll offer you another item if you can select an additional difficulty modifier and complete the challenge with both modifiers present. If you fail though, you'll lose both rewards and walk away with nothing.
Both rewards? Fakže... Neboli... Všechny rewardy
If you succeed, you'll be offered an additional reward in exchange for adding yet another difficulty modifier that stacks on top of the current ones. This cycle continues until the rewards become increasingly valuable and the encounter extremely difficult. You'll have to pick a point to end your run and claim your spoils before you make the encounter too hard and lose everything. At its longest, an ultimatum in in-game maps can sometimes have up to 10 fast trials in a row, with a special surprise in the last one. In maps, you'll occasionally find items called Inscribed Ultimatums. These items can be placed in the map device to transport you to the Trial Master's domain. Each Inscribed Ultimatum specifies an offering that you must bring with you, a reward you can earn, and an assortment of ultimatum difficulty modifiers. If you're able to complete the Trial Master will reward you with the specified reward, which is usually worth around twice the value of the item you must bring. For example, you may be asked to risk an Exalted Orb to win a stack of 2, or potentially risk a stack of 5 to win a stack of 10. Naturally, Inscribed Ultimatums can be traded with other players, so if you don't feel capable of completing a difficult challenge, you may be able to trade it away for a portion of the difference in price between the reward and the item that must be risked. Likewise, if you have a powerful character, you may be able to selectively trade for profitable ultimatums to run. There are also new unique items that can only be obtained from Ultimatum. One such unique is the Glimpse of Chaos Mask, which provides powerful benefits to your maximum life, mana, and energy shield at the cost of having severely reduced elemental resistances and no chaos resistance. The item can be corrupted multiple times and has unique corruption outcomes, such as removing a random modifier or transforming it into a different random corrupted unique helmet entirely that retains its corruption implicit mod. Another new Val unique item in Ultimatum is Mahuzottl's Machination, which grants you 6 keystone passives at once. Combining all of these keystones results in some very unusual outcomes, and the item features an entirely new unique keystone as well. We have worked hard to make sure that Ultimatum doesn't punish you for being in a party with other players. Party members compete in trials together, but have separate rewards available to them that will need to be locked in to begin the trial. Each player votes on which difficulty modifiers to select. If there's a draw in votes, the modifier will be chosen at random. If one player wants to take their reward and opt out of the next difficult trial, they're able to do so without stopping the other party members from continuing. Rewards are dropped allocated to the players who earned them.
To ani nebudu řešit. Mysleli na to, jak to bude fungovat, když budete v partner. No, ale tohle to bude drsný, že upgradeujou prakticky všecko. Co budeš hrát v nový lize?
Speaking of rewards, there's a lot to talk about here. We
možná
had a
Tornado
look at
Shot.
Path of Exile's past reward systems, and we honestly feel many of them are out of date, many of them kind of lack identity, and to top it all off, like the core drop pool of just items that drop when you kill regular monsters just wasn't really compelling enough. Like, you know that feeling where any monster could drop a mirror? We want that for a whole slew of different items. And so we've made a lot of changes to Path of Exile's reward systems. There's a bunch of ones to the core drop pool to keep it really interesting. There's ones to basically every piece of League and expansion specific content. And we're going to go through all of those for quite a while now. And I should mention that every change we're about to discuss not only affects the Ultimatum League, but also Standard League too. We started by reviewing which items can drop from monsters and chests in the core game. To make sure the core drop pool remains compelling, we've made various changes. You can now find 2 additional currency items as core drops, Orbs of Binding from the Harbinger League, and the new Veiled Chaos Orb, which we'll reveal in more detail soon. We've also added 5 new Atlas base types, like this Energy Shield Recharge Amulet. These drop in specific regions of the Atlas of Worlds and have some powerful new implicit mods. Another topic related to the core drop pool is that of boss runs. Veteran community members will remember when people used to do Val Oversoul or Dominus runs over and over because they were a profitable use of time. Final Act bosses now drop more and better items, giving you a much more satisfying close to a difficult act and a more item-focused approach to getting ready for maps if you prefer. We've also added a bunch of very powerful and valuable League-specific uniques into the core drop pool. This means that they can drop from any sufficiently high-level monster without you having to engage with specialized content. Examples of these are Badge of the Brotherhood, Salem, Maloney's Mechanism, Brutus's Sprinkler, and Headhunter. The goal of all of these changes is to make sure that every monster you kill in Path of Exile has a chance to drop something incredibly valuable, regardless of what content you're playing. On top of all of that, we have added a handful of new vendor recipes, which let you make some pretty cool stuff. We really miss the days when players were scrambling to try to find unknown recipes, and so we're looking forward to seeing how long it takes for you to discover how these ones work. We have also introduced a new type of reliquary key into the core drop pool for this expansion. If you're very lucky, you can find a Val reliquary key from any monster or chest in Path of Exile. When consumed in the map device, it gives you access to a vault with a chest that drops a special foil version of a Val-themed unique item. Each unique has an equal chance of dropping. Due to the value and power level of the items contained within, this is the rarest reliquary key ever added to Path of Exile. The rest of our reward changes relate to items that you can earn by playing past content like prior leagues and expansions. We have 2 goals here. The first is to add and improve items so that all past content is a compelling set of rewards. The second goal is to make it so that the best way to get any reward is to play the content that is primarily associated with that type of reward.
Koukám, že lidi už získali dropy, to je super.
Sacrifice of the Val introduced a new ultimate boss, Adzeri, Queen of the Val. This fight holds up pretty well these days, considering that it is 7 years old, but its rewards really needed a refresh. The Sacrificial Garb base type that drops from Adzeri has been significantly improved with the addition of an implicit mod that grants +1 to the level of all Val gems you have equipped. We have also added 2 new unique items to Adzeri's drop pool and 2 more to the Grand series. One of which is the Adzeri's Rule Judgment Staff, which prevents you from being stunned or having your damage reflected. It grants a skill that alternates between Flames of Judgment and Storm of Judgment when used, as if you absorb the powers of Adzeri. Skipping forward to 2016's release of Ascendancy, we have made some changes to how you receive your Labyrinth Enchantments. Previously, when you completed the Labyrinth and went to enchant an item, you couldn't see what random result you'd get. Now, the result for each type of enchantment is shown to you in advance so you can make the right choice. In the Eternal Labyrinth, you're now offered 3 different helmet enchantments to pick between, in addition to the boots and gloves. This will make it a lot easier to find enchantments relevant to the skills you're using and to apply them to appropriate items. In 3.14, we're going to stop giving out unique jewels for each day's fastest Labyrinth runs, and we have added these jewels as very rare drops that you might find in the Labyrinth's final reward chests.
Takže tohle to nebude za nejvyšší rychlost, ale můžete to získat náhodně při dokončení labyrintu. Nemusíte chodit do blbýho Aspirants Plazy, abyste otevřeli labyrint.
If used correctly, you'll be granted protection from shock and ignite, as well as additional fire damage. Kadira Perandus now has a much larger selection of unique item rewards. We have also rebalanced all sources of Perandus coins so that Perandus content is still the best place to get them from. A craft introduced in Harvest kind of destroyed the Perandus coin economy, so we're absolutely fixing that at the same time. Essences have been numerically rebalanced and are in general stronger than they were before. Screaming essences can now be used to reroll rare items, in addition to their capability to upgrade items to rare.
Screaming umí chaosovat. To jsem říkal už
less useful outcomes improved or replaced. Now, the only way to get the powerful upgrade-only top-tier essences is through remnants of corruption, which come from essence content. Blessings, the currency used to upgrade breach uniques, can now be used to upgrade breach stones between tiers also.
Taky super. Takže blessingy na něco budou.
Abyss jewels have been rebalanced and are on average more powerful than they were before. We have also buffed Abyss chests to make sure that they are the best place to get Abyss jewels.
Buffujou.
We have also introduced Abyss Scarabs and have added 4 new Abyss-specific unique jewels, such as Tekrod's Gaze, a murderous eye jewel that increases your main hand critical strike chance and your offhand critical strike multiplier based on how many murderous eye jewels you have equipped. Another example is the Ulaman's Gaze Searching Eye Jewel, which counts how many Searching Eye Jewels you have equipped and grants your projectiles a chance to be able to chain when colliding with terrain proportional to this number. These unique jewels have a chance to drop from any of the unique encounters at the end of the Abyssal Depths, and these encounters are now by far the most reliable way to obtain a Stygian Vice belt. We have added a handful of new beastcrafts, such as add a mod to a map, or add a mod to an influenced item, which consume existing beasts. There are some other aspects of beastcrafting that we've been keeping our eye on for a while, and we're taking this opportunity to rework them, so that high-level gameplay is less reliant on obtaining certain beastcrafts. Now, when you use a splitting beastcraft recipe on an item, both copies are marked as split, which prevents them from being split again. You cannot imprint split items. One of my favorite reward changes in this expansion is that Incursion's Temple of Atsuato can now be itemized. Once you have access to the map device, Alpha can turn your completed and ready to run temple into a tradable object that can be consumed in the map device. This means that players can specialize in making temples to trade to other players.
Můžete kupovat double corruption temply. Ano.
There have also been a lot of changes to the temple. As you may know, specific rooms in the Temple of Atsuato can drop unique incursion items that can be later upgraded. Many of these base unique items have been improved in this update. Previously, the temple's boss, the Omnitect, dropped random rare items with special incursion mods on them. Now it also drops rare items with incursion mods based around the themes of the rooms your temple contains. Higher tier rooms cause more rare items. Specific rooms now add specific monster packs to the temple, which results in more monster density, challenge, and reward. Temple mods have been buffed so that if your temple has more high tier rooms, then it's equivalent to a good map. We have performed a modernization pass on rewards from temple rooms so that they're competitive with rewards from newer leagues. The explosive room also contains some basic chests that can be opened with flash powder kegs if you don't need them for opening a path elsewhere in the temple. Delve has had a big increase to early rewards and a reduction to the quantity of high-tier rewards spawning at very deep depths. The end result is that Delve is a lot more rewarding for almost everyone, but a few extreme players who delve very deep will not be getting quite so rich from it. A big problem with rewards and betrayal is that players deem it not worthwhile to kill Katarina.
Po dvou letech, že by to rebalancovali konečně.
In this expansion, we have massively increased the incentive for doing this. Now if you manage to kill Katarina, all Syndicate members drop their rewards at one tier higher than they previously would. This change required the introduction of a new 4th tier of reward from each Syndicate member and encourages the use of a larger variety of Syndicate targets and safe house leaders. We have improved rewards that were not as interesting or valuable as the best ones. For cases where we deemed rewards too powerful, we moved them to tier 4 rather than nerfing them. The tier 4 rewards are approximately twice as powerful as tier 3 ones were. We have also added a new unique item to Katarina's drop pool as further incentive for killing her.
Unique.
The Cane of Kulamak drops only from Katarina. Similar to Paradoxica, it has 3 veiled modifiers that must be unveiled one at a time via Jun. This means that each version of the cane could be entirely different, and because of the way the veiled modifier system works, you have the chance to get 3 mods that potentially synergize extremely well, or maybe just a crazy bag of mods that don't work together. Furthermore, the cane itself scales up the magnitudes of any unveiled modifier.
Řekl bych, že ty tier 4 to je něco zajímavého.
We've made some changes to how unveiling mods works. You still get offered a choice of 3 mods, but these are now more powerful versions of the existing ones. The powerful ones are unveiled onto items, and the normal versions are the ones you unlock that can be crafted onto items. Also, progress towards unlocking crafting of veiled mods is at a slightly faster rate than before. Some very powerful veiled modifiers are now only available at their original strength on the unveiled version of the modifier, and the crafted version of the modifier has been lowered in power. Earlier in the presentation, I alluded to the new Veiled Chaos Orb as an item that has been added to Path of Exile's core drop pool. This new currency item rerolls the target item with new mods, like a regular Chaos Orb does, but one mod is guaranteed to be a Veiled mod. While it can drop from any monster or chest in the game, by far the most effective way of getting it is from Exiling and some Betrayal safe houses. We've introduced 3 new types of incubators for Blight, Metamorph, and Delirium, and have modernized the rewards from the other incubators. The item yield from chests and blighted maps is now affected by a portion of the map item's quantity, giving you a reason to roll your blighted maps if you can handle the additional challenge.
Blighted mapy budou škálovat s kvantitou.
Rebalanced and reworked so that each has its own purpose and with a consistent increase in reward as the oils get rarer. This is basically entirely buffs, because one big nerf we needed to do was already done last league. You can now corrupt blighted maps. These can very rarely drop the new Tainted Oil, which allows you to apply anointments to corrupted items.
Tainted Oil?
We have also introduced blighted
Scarabs. Na korapnutý předměty.
We have added two new types of catalysts themed around speed and critical strikes, respectively. These new catalysts are rarer than previous ones.
Speedový a kritový a budou vzácnější než
to, co bylo dosud. As discussed in the recent development manifesto, the current 3.13 version of Harvest is too rewarding, so we're rebalancing its crafting and also increasing how often you'll encounter portals to the Sacred Grove. The current version spams you with way too many crafts, so each seed has a chance to grant a craft now, reducing the overall number of crafts you can perform per garden, though you will encounter the grove 60% more than you did before. Some of the most powerful crafting options have been removed or changed. The Heart of the Grove encounter is now a map fragment that can randomly drop from tier 4 harvest bosses instead of rarely replacing the entire grove when it spawns. With the release of Ultimatum, Ritual will be added to the core game, with a chance to occur in each map you play. It has also been added to the Atlas passive skill tree system and is available as a sextant. Almost every time we release a league, we later roll it into the core game with a chance to spawn in maps. Usually 10%, sometimes 5%. When Ritual is added to the core game, we are standardizing this rate at 8%, which means a small decrease for some leagues and an increase for Harvest.
Všechny věci budou 8% šance, že budou HP. Zatímco doteďka byl některý 5%, některý 10%.
Chance for bonus content, meaning they now offer more than double the chance of encountering your preferred content. So I just spent a ton of time describing lots of buffs to Path of Exile's different reward systems, and there was one nerf that I left to last. And this gives us a nerf to a league that I kind of care about a bit. Talisman was one that I kind of led the design on, and players joke that it's my favorite league. Now, in the 3.12.3 content update, there was a change to Talismans. Basically, they weren't good enough, so the team decided to add a random anointment to them, which made them a lot more powerful, and also to juice up the mods to make them well-rolled. And that was overkill. Like, as you've seen recently, Talismans have just been dropping with insane mods and great anointments, and we felt in this expansion, especially because you can use Tainted Oils in order to redo the anointments on Talismans, because now you can modify corrupted amulets.
To je tak brutální update tohleto? Tyjo, to je fakt dobrý. Myslím si, že ta league mechanika samotná je zase na prd.
Every Path of Exile expansion needs new ways for players to support their enemies. In Path of Exile Ultimatum, this takes the form of 4 new skill gems and 4 support gems. In line with Ultimatum's philosophy, these gems focus on blood, the idea of spending life rather than mana to use your skills. Alongside the new skill and support gems, we've also made some adjustments to the low life mechanic, including changing the low life threshold to 50%. This makes it much easier and safer to stay on low life for builds where it matters. Typically, when players create low-life builds, they rely on Energy Shield to protect themselves against incoming damage. The new skill Petrified Blood enables low-life builds to instead use some of their life pool to absorb hits. While it's active, you can't recover life above 50% through any method other than flasks. Sources of life recovery like life regeneration and life leech only apply to the bottom half of your life pool. Additionally, a portion of incoming hit damage that affects the lower half of your life pool is spread out over time rather than being applied instantly. Corrupting Fever consumes a chunk of your life and grants you a buff that causes all your hits to apply Corrupted Blood to your enemies. Corrupted Blood stacks up with each hit, causing more and more physical damage over time. When you have consumed a certain amount of life to cast spells from your life pool, the buff's duration refreshes. Essentially, as long as you're consuming life to use skills, you'll be causing damage over time to stack on enemies. Be careful though. The Exsanguinate skill shoots tendrils of blood in front of you at the cost of life rather than mana. In addition to a strong physical damage hit, it also applies a physical damage over time debuff, which can stack up to 3 times. You can also support Exsanguinate so that its tendrils chain from one target to the next. Reap conjures a giant bloody scythe that swings across the select area, applying strong hit damage and physical damage over time. Each use of the skill causes it to gain a charge that scales its damage up and increases its life cost up to 5 times. These charges drop off over time as well as after killing enemies, making Reap very powerful at stacking up damage against single targets. We've also added 2 new support gems that have split the existing blood magic support into 2 separate support gems. The first of these is the Arrogance support, which causes supporters' skills to reserve life instead of mana, and also provides an increase to the effect of auras that it supports. Just like the original blood magic support gem, the reservation multiplier diminishes as the gem levels up. The Lifetap Support Gem causes supporters' skills to cost life instead of mana. Once you've consumed a certain amount of life to use a skill, you gain Lifetap, which increases your damage for a few seconds. The Cruelty Support Gem grants a buff called Cruelty, which increases the damage over time you deal with supported skills. It also boosts the hit damage from supported skills, and the Cruelty buff gets stronger the harder you hit. This gem is designed as an additional option for builds that focus on both hits and damage over time. The Bloodthirst Support Gem is a new option for low life attackers. This gem adds a percentage of your life as physical weapon damage while you're on low life, letting low life attack based builds really scale their damage, which wasn't an option before. Alongside a Val-themed expansion and blood-themed gems, it felt right to take the opportunity to improve Val skills, which are supercharged versions of regular gems that charge up with the souls of your slain enemies to deal huge bursts of damage. One of the main improvements is that you now get far more souls for Val skills from damaging unique enemies, so your Val skills will recharge faster against bosses. We've also improved the Atziri's Reign unique jewel. Alongside increasing the duration of your Val skills, it also grants a chance to regain all consumed souls. Val skills have also received a balance pass that you can check out on the full Path of Exile Ultimatum patch notes in a few days. So we've covered most of the key components that make up Path of Exile Ultimatum. Keep an eye on the news over the next week as we reveal the finer details of what's coming.
Tak a teďko bude ještě rozhovor s Liggy a
Let's have a quick look at the new supporter packs that are available right now to celebrate the launch of Ultimatum and help fund ongoing development of Path of Exile. The Silver Crescent and Imperial Sun supporter packs come with massive
věci, co si můžete koupit, abyste podpořili. Já je podporu tím, že si kupuju stešteby
and of course, exclusive cosmetic microtransactions such as armor sets, alternate helmets, and weapon skins. The Silver Crescent series has an exclusive portal effect, and the Imperial Sun series has an exclusive aura.
Abych to řekl.
Each series has 2 packs, and the smaller packs can be upgraded to their respective large pack anytime while they're still on sale.
Já možná vypnu.
These are of course in addition to the new core packs that were...
Ultimátum má podle mě 2 zásadní problémy. Za prvé, rich get richer. To znamená takový to, když jste schopný porazit nějakou tu pozvánku, ale nevím, jak se to jmenoval, tak obětujete exalt, dostanete zpátky 2 exalty. Když jste schopný tohleto udělat, tak jste schopný neustále tohleto navyšovat. Předpokládám, že tyhle ty pozvánky se budou potom prodávat za cenu blízkou 1 exaltu, nebo nakonec na tom nebude žádný velký profit. Ale úplně na začátku, co tam říká, Q&A coming up. To bude každou chvilku. Úplně na začátku jenom nějaký lidi, co budou nejpokročilejší, to budou schopný udělat a ty na tom budou hodně vydělávat. Řekl bych, že se to ale vyřeší nakonec tím tržním prostředím, že věc, co vám dá plus 1 exalt, bude stát skoro 1 exalt, takže nakonec to bude v zásadě úplně na nic. Takže to je taky možná problém, že to nakonec bude vlastně na nic. Až na to, že budete, dejme tomu, 4 nrsy a můžete si je zdvojnásobit, tak to bude na získávání nrs, něčeho konkrétního. Ale jinak, co se týká tržní hodnoty, to nakonec nebude speciálně výhodný. Díky za follow. Jinak, kdo všecko nefollowujete, můžete follownout. Myslím, že jako follower only chat mode, tak abyste mohli psát něco. Co se týká tohletoho ultimáta, tak si myslím, že to bude podobný problém jako s rituálem. To znamená, zdržuje to. Vy tam někam přijete a je to 10 maličkatých soubojů. Nebo až 10, že jo? Pokud si myslíte, že něco už nedáte, tak to můžete ukončit dřív. Jestliže dáte všech 10, tak získáte těch 10 rewardů a říkali, že po tom 10. souboji tam bude nějaký překvapení. To znamená, možná bude souboj s tím chaos týpkem, jemu se říká chaos. Nebo možná nějaká architekt nebo něco takového. Takže to předpokládám, že asi bude nějaký souboj a z něj pravděpodobně budou zase nějaký league specific uniky padat. Já nevím, jak dlouho teď bude trvat tohleto, možná se ještě kouknu na Path of Exileovej Exilové stránky, tam bude o této lize další informace. Jinak, tady tím tlačítkem se kouknete na rewardy, který už máte, to znamená tohleto. A kdykoliv jste schopný to ukončit po souboji, to znamená, dáte take rewards a ty 3 rewardy, které jste doposud měli, tak si vezmete. Případně chcete další vlnu, evidentně 4., když tady byly 3 věci. Tady vidíte, jaký tam máte k tomu postihy, to je v zásadě jako map mody, typu máte elemental weakness na sobě a tadyhle si vyberete podle mě ještě další 4. S tím, že těch postihů asi můžete mít ještě víc. Wave of Monsters, Accept Rituál a v tu chvíli hrajete o toto plus toto. Zase to bude podobný problém, jako byl v Blightu, jako byl v Rituálu, to znamená, pokud to bude hodně výhodný, tak lidi budou dělat to, že vlezou do mapy, budou řešit rituál a ani nebudou dodělávat bose, nebo celkově nebudou clearovat mapu, to je jedna varianta. Druhá varianta, nebude to moc silný, tím pádem budou rituál úplně ignorovat, poběžej dál. Pravděpodobně se k jednomu z těch 2 extrémů dostaneme. No. Já se zkusím podívat ty Path of Exile. Předpokládám, že stránky se nenačítají. Totálně zahlcený stránky, vůbec se nenačítají. Já to mám na vedlejším monitoru. Schválně. 319 000, když jsem se koukal posledně. 248 000 diváků teďko. 139, se kouká hodně. Takže, přetížené, no. Path of Exile stránky teďko nefungují. Takže, schválně si takhle něco zkusím podívat, já si něco koupím, křídla, je tu nějaký drop, ano, hele, zvuk.
G'day folks and welcome back
jako ten rebalance všeho?
And Q&A session with the one and only Chris Wilson. Good morning, Chris.
Proč je tak strašně nekvalitní těch webkamery?
How are you feeling about the reactions so far?
I'm pretty hyped actually. That was a lot of stuff to cover and it was really cool watching Twitch chat.
Yeah, this method of doing the reveals, how are you liking it? It seems like last time it was jam-packed full of stuff and there's almost like not a second to breathe between different things, so it's a lot to digest.
Yeah, it's. I like.
Kdybych jim měl dát zpětnou vazbu, tak ta ukázka Path of Exile 2 byla moc dlouhá.
It's quite personal to get a chance to like interact with the community about the actual changes as they're announced, as opposed to.
Není možný splitovat víckrát předměty, víc než jednou.
That's good stuff. So I'm going to jump straight into PoE 2.
To je dobrý, to je podle super.
First, the ones that stood out to me were definitely spears and crossbows. 2 things that I've been very excited to potentially see in PoE one day. I remember asking years and years ago whether we'd get stuff like spears and crossbows, and it was kind of like always a maybe, probably not. It's a lot of work to make the animations for new things like that.
Já si myslím, že hrát standard je úplně v klidu, protože toto je podobný případ jako v minulý lize. Ty změny, které přichází, budou i na standardu. Jediný, co bude v lize nový, je ta league mechanika a ta je v zásadě jenom dostanete nějaký reward.
And so new weapon types are totally fair game, and we've got some interesting ideas there. And of course, spears and crossbows are both iconic action RPG ones that we hadn't done yet, so it makes sense to put them in PoE 2.
I imagine that new rigging system then makes it easier to make more skills, but also more interesting and dynamic skills, potentially?
Absolutely, and this custom animation for each skill, basically. A lot of the suffix or one skills will use whatever animation is appropriate. Sometimes new animations, of course, but it's often kind of the closest animation we have, whereas in PoE 2 we're pretty much animating everything we can by hand.
Awesome stuff. Now, chat, we have some pre-prepared questions to give you time to formulate and ask some questions. But do ask questions in chat. We have some helpful people in the background taking questions, which we'll ask after some ones that I've already prepared. So, firstly, asking about spears and crossbows further. They each have implicit skills. How many of these are there?
So this is a number that keeps on growing. We basically showed you the ones we've got working so far, and we expect that to grow, of course, by release. So we have a reasonable stable for each. In terms of the crossbow ones, for example, there's currently 2 main skills that are built into the crossbows you've seen. We hope to add several more. So there's the Cascade one and Power Shot. There'll be several more damage shapes coming. And then in terms of damage types, we showed you 3 types of bolts,
která zlepší
hratelnost, to bude plynuvější, protože nebude padat tu na bordou. And if we keep it in, it will definitely be an option. That's actually an homage to the 2012 Dread movie, so we find it funny at least. Anyway, there's 3 of those ammo types working in the game at the moment, but we'll clearly add a lot more, and so the exponential number of final combinations will be pretty high.
So did you say like 7 damage shapes?
We've got there's 2 damage shapes currently. That's the Cascade and the Power Shot, and we're looking to add several more. So several rather than 7. But that that could be quite a high number overall. Basically, we want to find ones that fit themes for base types of crossbows, and so ideally the end game crossbows will support several of these.
Ta Katarína je taky zajímavá. Konečně udělali něco, proč má důvod Katarínu hrát, protože můžete získat předměty, které jinak nemůžete získat. Nebo že dostanete silnější rewardy, než můžete získat normálně. To, že Headhunter je v base dropu, to je super. Melonis mechanism taky zajímavý.
So the support gems also linked to the bolts, the damage type aspect of it, and not the actual
Pledge offense je celkem jedno, podle mě.
Yeah. Power shot. Gotcha. And that's because of the new skill gem system, obviously, which now grants skills based on the item sockets, and then you sock it into a completely separate menu.
Musím říct, že oni se jako povíde o Path of Exile 2 a tam nějakých skillech, nebo to jsou ty kušovitý věci. To jsem podle mě hned pochopil. Tohle to je zajímavý. Ten chaos, který přidává Veiltmu. Ale jako stiším. To je zajímavý, protože tu změnu, kterou udělali, je ta, že některý, nevím jestli všechny, nebo jenom některý, ty veilnutý mody, ty nejsilnější varianty, sice unveilnete plácnu, bude mít hodnotu 20 až 25%, ovšem to, co vy dostanete do craftu, do crafting benche, bude dejme tomu jenom 15 až 19%. Takže to je podle mě správně, že můžete unveilovat něco silnějšího. Kdy vypadá překvapené.
Wow, okay. I'm seeing a few questions already about kind of like distinctions between PoE 1 and PoE 2 here. People asking things like, does that mean spears and crossbows can't be used in PoE 1?
So that's tricky because it's technically possible to get Path of Exile 2 items on your Path of Exile 1 characters in the end game because of the shared end game nature of it. And so if we don't have animation support for the old character
je super, jak opravili hrozně moc těch věcí, co nedávaly smysl, přidali tam věci, to je super.
Okay. And on that note, I guess, how will we be handling accommodating new weapon types in the existing skill tree as well? It's getting big.
Right, so from a skill tree point of view, we haven't announced what we're doing yet with Path of Exile 2's skill tree. There's going to be some interesting stuff, and of course, you know, it's going to accommodate all the weapon types it supports. It may be that Path of Exile 1 characters, and hence their skill tree, don't necessarily support the new weapon types, and you have to play a Path of Exile 2 character to get them. But we kind of expect that by the time that Path of Exile 2 is out and ready, a lot of people are going to be choosing to play Path of Exile 2 characters because of the vast amount of new content there.
Kind of like further on the note between PoE 1 and PoE 2, will the existing campaign be like just a direct one-to-one port, or will it be seeing like PoE 2 upgrades applied to it as well retroactively? And for like, I guess, how long will it
buffly rewardy z těch
so
z toho příběhu z bossů.
I just got a note, by the way, on the last question from the team that all of the existing Path of Exile 1 characters are going to be swapped over to use the Path of Exile 2 rigs, which adds full support for using spears and crossbows on them. So that's information I did not know, which is actually very helpful, and the team have obviously thought of that. With regard to the campaign itself, we're incidentally getting upgrades whenever we improve assets that are used in both campaigns. We want, where possible, to take the best of Path of Exile 1 and improve it for Path of Exile 2. And so when we do that, it upgrades it in Path of Exile 1.
Posledně při tomhle uvedení začal mít Twitch problém během tohle uvedení. Naštěstí až během Bayclassu, který je celkem nepodstatný.
Like it's a product that we are monetizing and maintaining and, you know, treat with pride and confidence and stuff. But at the same time, we're intentionally putting most of our development efforts into making a new Path of Exile 2 campaign that fixes, you know, perceived problems with the way the Path of Exile works. And so it'll be a bit of a patchwork quilt, I suspect, in a few years, where some of the content will date back to the early 2000s, 2010s, and some of it will be brand new.
I look forward to seeing how it evolves alongside PoE 2's campaign then. A lot of people noted that the stream showed like quite a slowdown in content in PoE 2, and it was talked about previously that it will be a bit of a pullback in terms of overall game speed. Is that still the case? Where are you looking to kind of pitch the speed of PoE 2 compared to PoE 1?
We want Path of Exile 2 to be a slightly more claustrophobic personal experience, but we understand that when presented with that, players find ways to make their characters go fast, because after all, these games are measured on what items you find, and that's in direct proportion to how many monsters you kill, and that's in direct proportion to how fast you can go. And so, yes, it is a game where people will end up going fast. All of the crazy character builds and more are still possible, so I would rather expect that Path of Exile's speed continues to be a high-speed game once we hit the end game and people get their character builds established. But we still have to try as hard as possible to make it a compelling experience for people that want to play at a normal pace as well. And so while we played at a normal pace through that particular showcase there, it's possible to run through, right? You can, be very smart about which monsters you kill. You can do the whole thing rather quickly if you're a racer. So yes, we're trying to make things a bit slower, but we're not doing it in a way that's going to hurt the spirit of Path of Exile, because we understand how people like to play and we want to support that.
Right. I remember hearing that both campaigns would be roughly similar length, and the new one's 7x compared to 10x, so I imagine things like boss fights and certain encounters and stuff like that will be like more difficult and longer than comparable encounters in the previous campaign then, right?
Yeah, and that's partly because when we were making the it was literally a matter of, let's take a bandit and let's scale it up and give it a name and throw heavy strike on it, and that's a boss, if you see what I mean. Let's take a rower and retexture it and put an aura on, and that's a boss. Whereas here we're planning them into the levels. We think of an idea for a level and say, what would be the coolest thing we can put in this level? And then we build that in. And so it means the boss fights are significantly more complicated and interesting. And I don't expect that's going to slow players down a lot, because we're not like throwing vulnerability phases into those mini bosses necessarily. But, there's certainly going to be interesting fights at the very least.
And it was talked about making bosses more rewarding as well. Do you think like the average boss in PoE 2, since they're going to be harder, is also potentially going to be more rewarding as well?
We want to make sure the rewards are pitched at a good level. The changes to the rewards of bosses in Path of Exile 1 is just making sure it's worth your time actually going and farming them. If you go and do an Act 10 Katava run, we want it so that you actually get some decent items, and it's worth repeating that process when gearing up for maps. Now, of course, it's probably still more profitable to just go and play maps, but some people want to just get themselves ready before they start expending currency on every area they run.
I do have a bit of a nostalgia for like farming Piety and Dominus back in the earlier days of PoE 2, PoE, so it'd be interesting to see if there's more of that in PoE 2, or even sooner, I guess, since a lot of these changes are coming very soon. Matarik asks, will Path of Exile 2 be sticking to a 3-month league-based cycle like PoE 1, or is there any intentions to change this at this point?
We're pretty happy with the 3-month cycle. It's a good duration. We haven't decided, obviously, yet, and it depends a little bit on when Path of Exile 2 is coming out and how it works around dates that year. But yeah, we do expect to continue. Quite nice actually getting to make the first leagues for Path of Exile 2 and designing those, because it'll be a fresh game where we can find things that integrate really well into it, and that's going to be quite interesting.
Cheesy asks, will there be any options to like reduce graphics for PoE 2, since it's looking like a much prettier game? Is it going to be a bit harder on like PC hardware than the current game?
It certainly has higher requirements, but we're looking into various technology like dynamic level of detail stuff and various other bits and pieces. And a lot of the engine improvements that have been made over the last few years are with a view to us basically never dropping frame rate and finding smart ways, like the dynamic resolution scaling and various other bits and pieces. If you're IO bound, for example, it uses placeholder textures and so on. And it's a fine balance, of course, between making sure this performs well and always looks good, but the intention is that we can have Path of Exile 2 on a wide variety of systems.
We saw a lot of really nice looking UI improvements in the PoE 2 trailers. I especially liked the boss bars, and even for separate boss bars next to each other, and dynamically changing and stuff like that was really cool. Is there going to be more UI customization in the future for PoE, especially something that's, I guess, bothered me in the past is like not being able to do more customization for things like buffs and debuffs and change which things are displayed and their locations?
I suspect that if we were to make changes like that, we'd look into rolling it into Path of Exile as soon as they're ready. But it's a difficult line between deciding the right place for the players they can focus on playing versus
Ziggy je zvláštní v tom, že on je z Austrálie a oni jsou z Nového Zélandu, neboli pro ně je jednoduchý se s ním spojit. Teďko asi za něma nelítá, ale za normálních okolností on přímo za něma lítá a oni mu ukazují ty věci, o kterých bude mluvit, neboli on je taková polooficiální prezentace Path of Exile, nebo býval takovej, a teďko dělat takovýhle rozhovor.
But these are all things we have to balance against the actual usability, and we do like the idea of adding more QOL there. From a UI point of view, by the way, I'd encourage viewers to have another look at the UI, like the HUD in the footage we just showed, because there's some interesting technology used there that I'm going to see if they can notice.
Was it the pretty boy around the health bar? Or something else?
That's one of the many benefits. We're rendering it in 3D now, so there's some very interesting lighting stuff.
Very nice. Yeah, I saw some like interesting lighting changes and some green stuff swooshing over the UI. That might be what you're hinting at, actually, because that's something I noticed, but I didn't know what it was about. Anyway, time to scrub over the VODs, well, after the Q&A. Bloodthirst Raccoon is asking, basically, if we're going to be getting more of the integration of things
Je super, že přebalancovávají ty rewardy, aby to bylo podobnější.
Stuff like that in game, and also similarly, the ideas that were talked about in the past about having the possibility of transferring items like across instances and stuff like that, cross-instance trading.
The change that's most likely to come is an integration of the trade websites into the game client, where people can basically like interact with stuff more easily without actually having to leave the game. And that means that, for example, if you see an item in the in-game trade site browser as such, you can click on it to whisper the person directly without having to copy and paste stuff around. That's more likely is the direction that we're going to go. We've talked about our views on trade for quite a while, about how it is important that there are some barriers to instant acquisition of items in order to encourage players to actually play the game to find items while still being able to.
Já mám pocit, že třeba že Quinn, ten je podle mě přímo z Nového Zélandu. Ale řekl bych, že asi Ziggy s nimi začal spolupracovat zdaleka nejdřív.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Ultimatum. It's on the surface looks quite similar to Ritual, and I heard a lot of people pointing that out. What are the key differences in your mind between Ultimatum and Ritual then?
Well, the similarity that we have here is that it's an in-area combat league where you encounter the encounter and then fight some monsters and get some rewards. And this is as opposed to going on a grand heist or collecting beasts straight up. So that's kind of where the similarities end, though.
Jako možná, že Ziggy to nehraje tak moc jako 10 největších streamerů, ale furt to bude hrát víc než 98% lidí.
I'm going to say up to 10 because that's where it goes in the end game, but usually 6 up to 10 modifiers to the fight that are your choice. You're presented with different options. If you don't want a certain constraint, you just don't have to add that one. And so you're kind of customizing the fight by essentially adding mods that further make it more difficult. And if you're lucky, you'll get an ultimatum run where the mods don't affect your character in a particularly negative way and you have an easier time. Sometimes you're just fighting through a slog of really hard stuff. And so the rewards escalate kind of exponentially here. Like the intention here isn't that you just make your way through the 6 to 10 rounds pretty easily and get your 6 to 10 rewards and walk away. The intention is it gets difficult and you have to make a choice of actually stopping. And we want it so even good players while playing through the campaign will reach a point where they say, okay, I've just got to take this stuff and leave. I can't risk
it. Mega problém.
There's an actual 50% chance that I'm going to screw it up.
Že prej ty rewardy budou jako výrazně škálovat, že v tom 10. levelu to bude mnohem lepší než ty věci předtím. Tím pádem to bude podle mě strašně vyžadovat hrát co nejsilnější build. A když budete hrát slabší buildy, tak budete mít málo rewardu. Trošku se toho bojím.
Some of the reward choices were things like put an Exalt in or a stack of Exalts or something and then double it. Woody Carrot actually asks how rare are the doubling the currency ultimatums?
I'm going to ask the team that, guys. How rare are the Inscribed Ultimatums?
Já si myslím, že ty Inscribed Ultimata jsou fakt o ničem. Jakože když vy to najdete, tak to pro vás teoreticky může znamenat, dostali jste Exile. Ale řekl bych, že ta jejich tradovatelnost bude strašně nízká.
I should note, of course, that that number will probably change by the time it's released. We're right now with a week to go, tweaking that number on an hourly basis, basically, as we playtest. In addition, these things are tradable, so it's one of those things where a lot of people, when they get one, they're going to say, oh, 5 Exalts in, get 10 out, therefore it's worth up to 5 Exalts profit, I'm going to sell it for 4. And then they list it, and then someone else is like, well, that's an easy 1 Exalt profit for me to get that and just do it because their character is a god. And so we're expecting a lot of people to just dump them on the economy for sale and a lot of people to just buy these up for easy profits because they know they can handle it.
Takže si můžete být jistý, že Grimro v první dny bude dělat tyhle ty Inscribed Ultimata a bude na tom strašně vydělávat.
Is one of those itemized ones that you can prepare for and only run when you have.
Takže od Exalkonu, kde byl aktivně hotový, tam ještě nebyl hotový, ale byl celkem slušně hotový. Mají hotový upgrade, to ještě ano, to je to, co pořád říkám. Já bych řekl, že teď už pracují třeba na Aktu 4, ale nedovedu si představit, že by to bylo dřív než na konci příštího roku. A klidně to bude později.
Bring what item and get out of cam? Sorry, I'm just...
Well, it'll depend. There are pools that it picks from, and so sometimes you'll get ones that are close in value, sometimes you get ones with a big difference in value, and those are obviously worth
Jak se bude prodávat nebo kupovat? Normálně na tradu, jako jakýkoliv jiný předmět.
Exactly.
Něco jako Bloodthirst, no, přesně.
Usually with a value difference between the two that's considerable, but our goal is basically, it's got the feeling of double or nothing on those kind of ultimatums.
Nice, awesome. Warass 8 asks, will the other skills get reworked, buff, nerf this time around, or is there any mechanical nerf to existing things?
Is that in reference to regular skills in the core game with the Ultimatum release?
Yeah.
We do have the usual patch notes coming out, but we try to cover basically just new stuff that we were doing with regard to skills. I don't know the extent of the changes to the other stuff. I will quickly check. Guys, regular skill changes. There's some nerfs and a couple of buffs, so seeing what people think about that. But no, I mean, nerfs are obviously for a reason. It's to keep the game good, and we, philosophically on that, we would rather gently nerf things that are right at the top and then have to fundamentally change the entire game to achieve the same balance thing in a roundabout way that players don't notice for a while. So it is a much more direct approach that we're taking these days. If something is just breaking the game through power, we'll cut a little bit off the top. Generally, whenever we do that, we're thinking it's still really good. Why are people so angry? And then they settle down after they've actually used it. So we are trying to make sure that the nerfs are just taking a bit of the power off the top and keeping the thing viable and fun.
There was a new unique that had
drops, a tam dole to je vyzvednout na Twitchi a potom to tam podle mě budeš mít přímo jak v té hře.
Yep.
Já to schválně udělám taky, já to asi už taky budu mít nazbíraný.
They're a set of keystones. This is a group of all keystones that work in interesting ways together, kind of like a puzzle for people to solve. So it'll be quite interesting to see how people work out how to play that character.
It's like a hand-tailored character build challenge that the devs are bringing forward to the community.
Think of it as like a designer's cut version of Path of Exile. This is the true way to play, right?
So CI Eldritch Battery, got it. Very nice. Moving down a little bit. Lexay wants to know, will like map mods affect ultimatums that you find, or I further addendums to that, what sort of things do affect ultimatums?
So guys, what mods affect ultimatums? They're asking about like map mods, for example.
Kdybych tak věděl, kde se dají křídla, armor attachment? To asi nemá.
Right. So it works pretty much how you would expect. If you're playing a regular map that has mods, then the ultimatum that you find in that map, just a regular one, will be fully affected by the mods. The inscribed ones are their own maps unto themselves, and so they don't have map mods because they're not rollable, but they do have a bonus to make them equivalent to decent maps.
Right. I imagine this.
Jo, už to tak zobrazil, jenom to chvilku trvalo. No, takže tak. Prostě po nějakých 2 minutách se mi tam zobrazilo, ale to. Takže skutečně stačí udělat jenom to, co tam napsali. A potom se to musí vyzvednout na Twitchi. U mě to trvalo tak nějakou minutku, 2, než se mi to zobrazilo.
I'm very excited about that concept actually as well. I've been playing most of the recent leagues co-op with my partner, and yeah, it's a mixed bag. Some leagues are really good for co-op, and others just kind of don't exactly work. So it seems like there's been a lot of thought there. Just to kind of clarify, each person gets their own separate rewards effectively from it, and they can like tap out and take their reward whenever they want, or they can continue.
That's correct.
If someone does tap out, can they like stay in the area and help you finish your fight? But they're just like their reward sequence ends. I imagine that's how it works.
My understanding is they're teleported outside it. Let me check.
In the regular game, they can still.
Right. Okay, so in the regular game, they can still help you out.
But they have to leave the map if it's the inscribed ones, then I'm guessing.
Yeah, how does it work with inscribed?
Inscribed one puts the inscription, kicks the.
Got it. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I guess this was sensible, and I should have worked that out. I mean, inscribed ones that has a specific thing that you're gambling and a specific thing you're receiving, and so that's it's only that occurs, if you see what I mean. So, for example, you and I are sitting there looking at a 5 to 10 exalt one, and so we're going to come up with 5 exalts. We're going to put it in the window, and we're going to get 10 once, regardless of the fact that there's 2 of us. If we want to play it together and make it a bit harder, because there's multiple players, we can do, but it isn't 5 exalts each.
Yeah, otherwise you'd have a beastery situation again where like every person in the party gets a copy of the beast and then a copy of a copy and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's scary.
Co to říkali? V tom beastcraftování přidejte mod na mapu?
A boss fight in Ultimatum.
Maybe. I mean, watch the trailer again, I guess.
Právě boss fight na Ultimatu to bylo, tam to bylo vidět, že týpek chaosový hrozně vyrostl.
Swoovles asks, can you just leave the ring?
Mimochodem, když se kouknete na tohleto logo, tenhle ten jakože vykřičník questové, tak teďko jsem si všimnul, že Path of Exile, to íčko, to je stejná věc.
Okay, so standing outside the ring for 5 seconds counts as failing the encounter.
Oh, so you can dip out for a little bit if you need to catch your breath and use the flask. Yeah, that's an interesting change compared to Ritual then, which had the hard barriers.
And this is also important for hardcore, of course, where when you're going to fail an encounter, it's better to do it by running away than by physically dying and losing your character.
Yeah. Often that's the
v tom ultimátu nemusíte to hrát do vaší smrti, ale můžete z něj jakoby utéct a tím to sice failnete, ale neumřete, tak to můžete hrát i v hardcore.
Excited about veiled mod changes.
Yes.
So the veiled mods themselves are now distinct from the craftable modifiers, and they're more powerful. How much higher are their power level compared
takhle to mělo být od začátku, že ty veilnutí jsou silnější než ty craftovatelé.
So the ones that you unveil onto items are almost tier 1 in power. The intention is that they're really punchy, and if you get it, you can build a good item around that. The crafted ones are lower because you get the ability to just add them at will, and so they serve the same purpose. They're just not quite as good as if you actually make the item the correct way. The amount of difference between crafted and unveiled depends a lot on the actual mod. Some of them are closer, some of them are much further away.
Is there any ones that do like different things, like how we have some of the higher tier affixes present some new mechanic or something like that, or is it just generally like here's more physical damage, that sort of thing?
I'll just confirm that. Yeah, it's the same thing with numerical differences.
Gotcha. So the Veiled Chaos Orb allows you to reroll an item modifier on the item as well, and unveiling that does give you crafting progress as well, so it's a way of unlocking those crafts faster.
Yeah, the Veiled Chaos Orb's used for crafting and unlocking. Yep, that's correct.
It said earlier in the presentation that the Chaos Orb drops are part of the core drop pool, right? Not like a betrayal specific.
Takhle je to ale vždycky, to už nemůžete být překvapený. První týden to padá, druhý týden jsou ještě silný nedokonalosti. Teprve na konci třetího týdne je to úplně v pohodě, tak jak to můžete hrát do konce lidi. Tak je to vždycky. Nebuďte překvapený.
This is actually a case of like, we initially really wanted to have it just as a betrayal reward. But
tuhle ligu to byl extrém, to bych neřekl. Já bych řekl, že Highs byl největší problém. Tahle liga byla celkem v pohodě. Tady byl jenom problém s tím načítáním textur pro mě.
Highs byl problém. Can you use the Veiled Chaos Orbs to put Veiled mods on influence bases?
Yes, you can.
Awesome. That's looking forward to some interesting crafting combos here. And can you veil Chaos, the character signature mods, like for example, Orion's minus mana cost?
No, you can't get those ones through that.
So those ones are still drop only from those specific characters?
Yeah.
Okay, how many previously League-specific uniques are being added to the drop pool?
Way more than the 6 that we listed. It's like 100 or something. Essentially, we looked at all the old League uniques, and there were kind of 2 ways you could get them. You could either get them by fighting content in that league, or you could get them by killing some specific boss. And all the ones that you get from specific bosses, like, Pale Council kind of stuff and so on, that stuff is still specific to those bosses. But every item that you could find by fighting league monsters that would drop because they're a monster of that league is now possible to get in the core drop pool. And so, in one swoop, we have made Path of Exile's unique pools significantly more interesting.
Takže to vypadá, že prakticky všechny uniky je teďko možný dostat v normální hře. Prakticky už teďko neexistují league specific věci.
How many headhunters am I going to find now?
So this is an interesting one, and the verdict is out on our math, because on one hand, I want to start by saying Headhunter is like clearly in the sights of the balance team of being very unhappy with how powerful this item is, right? And I am putting my foot down and saying, no, Headhunter is an iconic part of Path of Exile. We're not nerfing it. It's going to stay awesome, right? So I'm representing the community here. Headhunter stays great. But the concession here is that we don't want 47% of characters at the top of PoE Ninja to have a Headhunter equipped. We do want to make sure that it is a valuable item that's actually aspirational. And so part of the compromise here is you can get it in the core drop pool, obviously quite frequently, but it's also a little bit harder to get from other sources as well. So obviously there's going to be a lot more of them because you can find them from regular monsters, but there's going to be fewer of them from the various other ancillary places you can get them. And so to some extent, this balances out a bit. So randoms are going to be fighting headhunters a bit more than the dedicated players because the deterministic farming of it is harder than it was before. You know, it takes more ancient orb uses, for example. But technically, you can just chance your way into it earlier on without having to be in Nemesis content. And so ideally, we will see Headhunter remaining.
Takže věci, co v současnosti můžou dát Headhuntera, jako trošku náhodnou věc, ty budou nerfnutý, ale naopak ho bude moct úplně kdokoliv najít, úplně kdekoliv.
Because it means that a player who's not as good, not as lucky normally as other players, can just luck their way into something that gives them a ton of currency. And players who know what they're doing have plenty of deterministic options for still getting it, and deterministic options for raising currency they can use to just trade for one if they need it.
I love the idea of like some first-time player who's 40-something and they find a headhunter and they just wipe it on and be like, this seems okay.
Stabilita ligy se neměří podle toho, kolik tam hrálo hráčů.
And it happened with
Já se bavím o stabilitě, ne o úspěšnosti.
It was so cool watching some random player get something incredibly valuable and it just changes their game experience. And so we've just made sure that there's a lot of other options that they can find as well that are valuable.
Detective Jabsco asks, with the league items that have been changed to global drops, have they lost their league tags? Will you be able to chance them outside of their league now?
My understanding is that you will be able to chance items that, because they're just regularly in the global drop pool again. So my understanding is you can just chance a headhunter if you're lucky.
Takže můžeme chancovat
I'm excited to see the return of the Val Reliquary keys. I quite like those. It's sad to see them gone.
It's
mentioned that they are the rarest ever added to the game. How often will we see them? How rare is the rarest
ever? We'll find them less often than the previous ones. And our goal here is that they are very treasured things that you find occasionally. We don't want an expectation that people play this league expecting to get a handful of these, right? They're pretty rare. And so it's a thing that you can hope to get, and if you can trade for it, that's also good. But a lot of this comes down to the fact that these ones have a different way of distributing items. In the past, we said, okay, we've got some broken stuff for you guys, like, you know, unnerved counts and so on in the previous ones, and we're just gonna like make this fair by making them incredibly unlikely to get. If you watch videos of people opening a lot of past reliquary keys, you'll notice they don't really get the good items that often. There's a bias towards the junk, even though foily special junk has still got value, of course, because it's a collector's item. It wasn't a particularly fair distribution. With this new Val Reliquary key, we're trying a completely flat weighting, so every item has equal chances of spawning. And so while there are some fewer, less valuable items in there, there's also some very valuable items, especially valuable in foil, likely. And so because of this, we're being careful and making sure it doesn't drop particularly often. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the value of these, because we would rather be a case that even the foily worse items are still worth something from a collector point of view later, rather than just water it down.
I'm going to try and wring a little bit of detail out of you here. Is Headhunter in there? Is there a foil Headhunter?
I don't believe the Headhunter is classed as a Val item. So this is all the Val items in Path of Exile. There's quite a
Val I see, item. Okay. But that's a pretty important detail for people that want to like kind of do some math on there, because they'll be able to look at whatever's a Val item, count them, and then see one in how many you've got of getting specific items.
Yeah, we'll have an EV chart the next day, like with Magic the Gathering sets, you know.
Nice. I look forward to reading some of that detail, seeing what things I should be hoping for. So a big change is to beast crafting, and in particular beast item splitting. And, for those of you who don't really understand or know what that was all about, effectively it was
people
were able to duplicate stuff like
asi to bude jenom krátký, kouknu nějaký ty screenshoty, ale ještě na to se podívám.
Or other like crafting stage items that can be finished off. And so groups of
tady totiž odkryj se dostat, můžeme tu a tam nějaký informační klenot dostat, který jsme neměli z toho traileru, tak proto se na tohleto koukám ještě dost aktivně.
Effectively make it so that this can't happen anymore.
Part of it is that when we initially designed the splitting stuff for beast crafting, we knew that there was some base, because with an item there's the base and there's the mods on it, and splitting will wreck your mods generally and copy the base. So in a case where the base is the hard part to get, then the splitting recipe is valuable. And so we knew what valuable bases there were in the game beforehand. It's just that pool has increased a lot over time, and it's become incredibly abusive with stuff like, you know, watchstones and heist contracts or heist blueprints and so on, and the really good crafted bases for crafting projects. And so this was something we were keeping an eye on. And of course, there are ways of balancing it. We could just make those beasts incredibly rare and so on, and eventually it becomes, you know, a different way of doing a mirror. But we didn't really like that approach. So we started fighting on a specific basis of like, you know, watchstones and heist blueprints, for example, were quite abusive. So we started toning things down there, but the cases keep cropping up. And so we feel that this change here, where you can still duplicate something one time per item, is probably a sensible way to do it. It means that we're not having to fight it on a beast rarity basis. And it still means it's a viable mechanic where if you are crafting an item, you can potentially make 2 of it using this method.
It kind of follows the rule of mirroring a little bit, although it does make the original effectively mirrored as well, so that it can't be split again. It can still be changed, though, obviously.
Yeah, it does prevent the cartels from continuing to print many copies of the item, which is a cool mechanic, and I really like that. But the same thing does exist in the game in other ways, like those new vendor recipes that we've added, right? Some of those have some economic impact.
Ty nový vendor recepty, ty totiž ještě nezveřejnili.
They just start making the item you get from it.
That's awesome.
It'd be real interesting to see if certain things spike in value in the trade economy, unexplainably. And
I'm sure the trade cartels will be okay and find a way to make some money still.
Yeah, I should note that it's still worth, like, if you get a great watchstone with really good sextants on it, it's probably still worth splitting it, because that way you get to essentially duplicate the sextants that way. So there's still quite a lot of uses.
You just can't do it for the rest of the league. So on talismans, and kind of like looping into this is the idea of like the value of dropped rare items as well. So it's changed now so that they
tak 2 minuty.
but they don't
napiš vykřičník drops a musíš tam kliknout, aby si se vyzvednul.
Now, thanks to the new affix rolling system, alongside the like implicits that talismans have implicitly, and the random
talismany už nebudou enotnutý zase.
Really valuable ones. The effect of the talismans became one of the few rare items that I was like really interested in looking at on the ground and picking up and looting and potentially being an upgrade as opposed to crafting or trading for my upgrades. There seems to be a bit of a goal that Pee-wee is striving for, to have rares become more relevant again. So I'm curious why the like pullback away from the Loot 2.0 system for talismans then.
So there's a couple. The first thing to note is that the well-rolled mods thing isn't meant to be a Loot 2.0 thing, right? The well-rolled mods thing is not for, it's not the item decluttering system, which is a separate thing that we've got going on. It was implemented for heist because when you finished an entire heist and you get offered one or several rare items to pick from, we want to make sure that they're not just complete trash, because it is true that you can look through quite a lot of rares before you find something. So it's a lever that's available for us changing how drops spawn. With talismans, the original intent of a talisman is that it has a powerful implicit mod, and it has random, with normal weightings, explicit mods that cannot be changed. It's corrupted, right? So the normal experience with a talisman is you find one that's got a good implicit, and you're using it because of the good implicit. The explicit mods are going to be worse than what you have on a regular amulet, because that's just how talismans work. And of course, the god talismans are the ones where you get a good implicit, and also luckily get good explicit mods on it. So that's the original design intent for the item. Now, we found that, like, obviously people weren't using these and they didn't like them, and our options were to just dramatically increase the implicits on them. But we realized, oh, well, we've got this concept of anointments, why don't we throw those on? And so we added anointments, hoping that it would make talismans useful. And I guess somewhat defensively, the decision was made to also juice the mods a bit, because that's new tech that we had available, which certainly helped. But that's basically data that we have now. We know we don't need to actually do that, and we have to be careful with how we generate rare items in the future, because this is all working towards the grand decluttering project, which involves us essentially generating multiple rares and picking the best as far as the mods go. And there's no need for us to double dip here with talismans. As you say, talismans were an incredibly exciting thing to find because you were very likely to get an upgrade. Far more likely than any other type of item in the game, because they were just so skewed towards good ones. And that's bad from an expectations point of view, and also it's just different to all the other items in the game. So we're fixing that while understanding that we do actually need to finish the decluttering project, which is going to, for those who aren't aware, basically you get a lot of drops in Path of Exile, and we're essentially finding a way of turning item quantity into rolling multiple items and dropping the best ones instead. So in a situation where you clear a map and have 400 rares on the ground or whatever, that's going to be a much lower number of rares, but it's equivalent to seeing more than 400. So instead of having to ID 7 swords and see if any are good, you'll be IDing 1 or 2 swords which are equivalent or better than the 7 that you previously would have seen. And so this is something we're working towards, because there's a lot of items in Path of Exile, and this, of course, affects the whole clicking thing, where players pick up a lot of stuff. Obviously, if there is a more reasonable number of items falling, then there's far less clicking involved there. It probably has an effect on performance, with rendering all the items on the ground and so on. I mean, a small effect, but every item is technically a draw call for the item and for its shadow, so reducing the vast sea of white items on the ground certainly helps. And so that's a project we're working on, but it's also a dangerous one because right now you're used to seeing a lot of items and you ID them and they're generally bad, which is okay because you're not meant to get an upgrade every area. But if we say, okay, items are better now and we reduce it a lot, so you get far fewer items and you ID those, and those are also still all bad, which is okay because you're not meant to get an upgrade every area, you'll say, what is the point? You've just given me far less items and they're still bad. Because it's hard to tell the difference between two random distributions that aren't spitting out. And so we want to make sure we do this in a way where the game still feels very compelling to find item upgrades without making it too easy as a result in order to bribe players to like the system. Anyway,
a pokud se nemejlím, tak ta nabídka se vám zobrazí dřív, než tam dáte tu helmu. Takže ono vám to řekne, co já vím. Spectre, nebo Tornado Shot, nebo Heavy Strike. A vy máte připravenou, vy jste neměli připravenou Bone helmu, ale máte ji někde ve steši, tak nějaký ty spektry dáte na tu Bone helmu. Myslím si, že to je takhle. To je hodně zajímavý. Už se těším na ten můj, na to SSF. Já si myslím, že asi budu hrát SSF standard zase.
You can pitch it wherever you want to on the rare power curve and the game still works. But we have a game right now where players have expectations to get upgrades at a certain pace. And if we just said, look, the new reality is upgrades are far slower or something, that wouldn't be acceptable. So we have to make sure that the power ascension of items is similar to how it currently is. It's just done through players not having to read as many items per area.
PoE2 does seem like a good time to do that change, but is there any chance like this loot squish thing is happening essentially earlier than PoE2?
I think it needs to happen earlier, and I say that because A, we want to actually make sure it's good by the time PoE2 is released, and this is something we can, like, I don't want to jeopardize the launch of PoE2. I would much rather...
Ty Screaming Essence, že jsou chaosový, ježišmarja, to jsou všechno věci, které jsem já vnímal jako problémy.
Clicking,
tolik jich
there's a lot of items in Path of Exile.
Já to super nekoukám. 31 lifeu, effect of your curses?
Maybe it affects performance. And undoubtedly
effect of curses,
that's not the primary reason for fixing it, but it certainly helps to, you know, reduce the sea of items on the ground and just readability and approachability. You know how would want Path of Exile to feel approachable to new players, and if they look at a guy playing a map with at the sea, like the floor is entirely covered with items, and that's with the loot filter on. There are many reasons why we do need to address it earlier. It just means we have to do it in a way that's careful to not cause players to feel that we've wrecked drops in the game, even though our goal is equivalent or better item power from drops.
Just mentioned that like people randomly seeing the game thing. I'm just curious why there isn't like a cap on character size in regards to Headhunter. Why do we get Shin point of view Headhunter characters instead of just like, I don't know, 3 times the size characters? Just still impressive. Just curious.
I don't know why there isn't a cap on it. One second. The team says there is a cap now in 3.14. Well, there you go. Look what you've done, Ziggy.
What?
You talk.
I did it.
Bude omezení velikosti vaší postavy, takže když budete hrát Headhuntera, tak nebude bota přes celou obrazovku, ale bude to nějakým způsobem omezení.
I did it. I'm not even sad because he's mad at me for that.
To je správně.
I'm sure there's like some like small portion of players.
Ježiš, a že je tradovatelný Ciri, to skutečně znamená, že Imperial na konci ligy může odběhnout 100 double corrupt. Úplně v pohodě. Ty král.
Like rare rolling system. It was used in ritual on certain items, right, where they would have the better rolls. Is it potentially used on the rewards from
Ultimatum?
Ultimatum, that's the one.
Yes. It is, and that's because this is a case where we say to you, this is the reward you'll be getting, and if that's a random rare with normal odds, people will look at it and say, I see 1,000 random rares in a typical play session, I don't care about your item. Whereas we're going to show them some good items, and they're going to say, I'm going to risk everything, and then they're going to die, and then they'll be angry, and we'll laugh.
You'll laugh. I know you do. I know you will. Is there anywhere else you're looking to add that system? Like to, I don't know, like certain league-specific reward pools, blighted pustules, things like that?
It's generally cases where it's not okay to drop a pile of items. I would rather, generally, drop a reasonable number of items for players to choose between, but in the case that we have to present them with one, then we'll make sure that it's a compelling one.
Delf, to je taky zajímavý, že Delf, jako je to super, jak to přebalancovávají, protože skutečně nemělo žádný smysl delvovat, protože jste mohli získat možná pár základních fosil, které jsou teď bez ceny, a v hajstu dostáváte 10krát víc. Takže vzácnější fosily budou i vejš a naopak strašně hluboko těch fosil nebude tak strašně moc. Takže já si myslím, že když já jsem teď v Delvu 12, tak bych mohl být už na té horní hraně, takže to by mohlo být dobrý. Jenom to já nevím, jestli to znamená, že mi to přegeneruje delve. A nebo jestli teprve, když začnu chodit do stran, tak to bude lepší. Tradovatelný template pecka, super no. Prostě tohle to přesně potřebuje. V zásadě služby v této hře nejsou tradovatelné. Tak můžete tradovat ty předměty. Super.
We're hoping to see more use of the worst skills, and a lot of this is like we look at the characteristics
of the skills
that are used, and those are ones that have a lot of damage.
No, typická věc. Vy můžete zahrát v mapě 100 aut a mít z toho, co já vím, 30 templů. A nemusíte je odehrát hned a můžete si jich připravit, až budete mít 300 a potom si udělat jednu sešnu jenom běhání těch templů. A ne skládání. To je tak super. Tak super. Podobný to mělo být i s Harvestem. Řekl bych, že i s Harvestem by to mělo
the new Exile base type changes and so on, so it should be pretty exciting.
Not too exciting.
Very exciting. If I'm not the one doing the live stream next time, then you'll know what happened.
You're not allowed anymore.
To je taky potřeba, no. Jako je úplná blbost, když z jednoho monstra spadne 7 stejných splintrů a není to jako 7. Ale jako už ty změny jsou super, protože pořád to jde správným směrem ta hra. To je to důležitý.
I'd like to ask about something near and dear to my heart. Can we expect any new quality of life improvements, particularly in the realm of reducing the number of clicks in the game or
to bude stakování splintrů.
We're looking into QOL changes we can make, and we try to surreptitiously wrap them into each release that we do. So there's bits and pieces. Nothing click or strain related in this expansion, and that's partly because I want to try to tackle the decluttering as a way of really solving it. Like, I don't feel that suddenly action RPGs shouldn't involve clicking on items to pick them up. I think that that's been fine for a couple of decades, and humans' physiology hasn't changed. But I do completely acknowledge Path of Exile has way too many items to pick up. So yes, we will solve this probably by that method. I also have a pretty firm belief that it's important that in order for something to matter,
Blight Scarabs, hele, to jsem ani nevšiml při tom.
That's why items have, you know, the Tetris thing going on in the inventory, and where you've got to go and stash them in places.
Pokud tato neexistuje máser, tak já to Scarab.
Clicking on them in order to pick them up is an important part of that. So I wouldn't want a thing where, as you run around, the items are automatically scooped up into your auto-managed spreadsheets that you can, you know, export to Excel and so on, which is kind of the way that goes. That's a bit of a slippery slope thing. But yeah, people having to click too much, we need to address that. And whenever we're dropping currency, for example, we do ask, what are some reasonable sizes here? So you get a couple of stacks, a few stacks to pick up. We make sure to fix it so we're not dropping pennies everywhere like in some leagues. We are very consciously aware of that. But I think a lot of it's going to come from decluttering. And we're not afraid of making QOL changes, right? A discussion we're having soon is what QOL changes can we make. And it's good to keep pumping those out, just the right ones.
Znamená nic nepomůže zahrát 20 do šaby zároveň.
The Parandus coins are like a perfect example of picking up pennies, where you get Parandus chests that drop like literally 10 or 15 piles of 2 pennies. Sure. Obviously those are being increased now as part of the Parandus change, but like their piles being condensed, since those are things that can like super easily stack.
I'll make sure that we're not having 10 or 15 piles to pick up when we're doing the changes here, because that does sound unreasonable.
Myslím, že 4 maximálně.
Another one would be like, I noticed, so I'd been like tracking my clicks a little bit in PoE. And one thing I noticed was like a lot of my clicks are coming from transferring small items from my inventory to my stash. Mm-hmm. It's a lot better now that I don't have to change tabs every time I want to transfer something, so that happens automatically. But is there any like possibility of being able to do that sort of stuff in like fewer clicks to transfer over to your stash? I've already picked the item up and felt its weight at that point.
A fair argument. There's some technical considerations with moving multiple items at the same time we'd have to look into, but that's something I'll discuss with the team. No promises though.
I promise I would patiently wait and watch the items go tuk, 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 over from my inventory. Probably be really satisfying, actually. I look forward to hearing more about
to si myslím, že tady jenom diplomaticky nechtěl říct, ne, ale...
sometimes. Question about the breach stones. So now that
ano, upgradeování breachstonů pomocí blessingu.
A lot easier to get pure breach stones.
Yes.
Is the XP getting nerfed from those at all?
No.
Okay. Well, there you go. Lots of XP. We've got a lot more community questions now that have piled up. I've woven a few in at relevant points. Thanks for asking the questions, folks.
Found hodně dobrých upgradeů.
Asking, what was the change in the life pool showing leech or something? So the life pool was doing very perceptive by web use, doing some interesting things during a certain point.
Right. Okay, so you're looking at a Petrified Blood skill there. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but this is the one where while you're on low life, which is now at 50% as the threshold, hits that you take will partly be applied instantly, like normal, and partly affect you over time. And so it shows 2 levels in your health orb, one of them being the level it's kind of trickling down to.
I like the sounds of that mechanic. There was also the
ty nový skill gemy, ty si budu muset přečíst, ale předpokládám, že to nebude nic moc pro mě. Já jsem vždycky trošku zpomalený. O 1, 2, 3, 4 ligy. Je to náhodou fragment, tak to taky budu asi aktualizovat, že? Jako, jak se to jmenuje? Třeba ty invitation, předpokládám, že ty někam budeme muset dávat.
And so it's a thing where you use the skill, and if you use it enough times,
a já bych vůbec nebyl proti tomu, aby nám dali možnost koupit si specializovaný Echoes of the Atlas Step nebo něco takového. A tam by byly všechny tyhle ty věci.
Go back and watch the VOD. I've seen it 3 times now, so I've noticed a bit more and more each time. But particularly the skill section, if you're interested in that life stuff.
Za tebe jim já rád zaplatím.
That's all going to play out. Rodrigo.
A kdo nechce, nemusí, ten stuff může skládat do normálních tebů.
Will other built implicits be buffed to compensate, or will Stygians be stronger again?
Everyone's shaking their heads at me.
That's a no. Stygians are the way to go.
Že nechtějí soupeři z double verify. Co? Chytil jsem správně, že nebyl letos?
Will there be a change in the amount of essences, or you simply want to change the power of them?
My understanding is it's just the power that's changed here.
Nice. Okay.
Pořád nedošlo k žádným změnám, ani oni pořád neví, kdy to bude vydaný.
Apart from the tier 5 Screamings being able to.
Já bych řekl, že to bude 2023 nebo dál. Podle mě nejdřív to může být na konci příštího roku. Nejdřív.
Right, so they say there's numeric improvements to general essences, so this would have been a buff-focused balance sweep. And that's what we've tried to do here, is a buff-focused balance sweep to the rewards of the past leagues.
Interesting, some of those are already
můj 6-link Imperial Bow budu spamovat Screaming Essencem.
The ones that aren't are now to that power level or something. Curious to see. D. General Lee asks, what will happen to Twice Enchanted Lab? A double reroll? Yeah, I'm curious about this. Will it present all 6 options at once, or will it be like the 3 options you apply to an item and then there's another 3 options?
Twice Enchanted, mě taky zajímá. Já bych, že by to mělo být +1.
There's some UI that says how many times you get to use the bench.
Ah, fantastic.
So my understanding is it presents you with your 3+2 options, and you can, so your 3 plus the other base types options, and then you can pick it twice.
Yeah, if it was all at once, it would kind of be.
Ty a teďko ještě bude ten Rory. Já potřebuji vstávat brzo, ty. Base class už nebudu streamovat.
Past content reworks started.
Ale budu se na něj koukat.
Let's make the labyrinth give you 3 choices. That was where that whole thing started. Then it went into itemized temples as our 2 headline features, and then so much other stuff changed. It was awesome.
I can't believe like how many of those things were like literally my exact things that I wanted to see, like the itemized temples. And I just wanted to like point this out that the items dropping from the boss in the temple. So now like the items that drop from the boss with the specific modifiers are based on the runes in the temple. No. That's how I thought it worked when the league first came out, and I was really disappointed when it didn't work that way. So I'm glad to see that finally come back around.
It'll help.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a bit more temple action now, actually. I kind of wanted to. Beefcake Crunch asks, are there Atlas tree nerfs, i.e. the Harbingers? The Echoes of the Atlas.
Right. So I haven't seen the changes for this, so I'm going to talk generally speaking here. We introduced the system in the last league, and that means when it's introduced, there's going to be stuff that's wrong. So there's going to be stuff that had to be buffed a lot. There's going to be stuff that had to be nerfed a lot. And so I would expect fully to see some of the most abusive stuff probably toned down. And I would expect to see some of the stuff no one was picking to be more powerful. But I have not seen the changes, so I'm just making that up. Let me ask the team. How accurate is that? They say, yep. Yeah, so there are a bunch of changes. I mean, it's the thing we're learning about as we go. We make the system, we test it as best we can with our team of, 150 people here, and then we dump it on millions of people online and see how they break it, and then they really break it. And then we can either choose to leave it broken, which is the wrong choice when you're running a game that's going to be around another few decades, or make some changes. And so this is version 2. It's still meant to be powerful and compelling, and we'll see what people think.
Awesome stuff. A bunch of people spamming in the chat, just spamming flasks. So I'm guessing they're curious if there's going to be any flasking changes.
No flask changes in this one.
I assume that's
jako minimálně to nabindování vícero flašek na jedno tlačítko by fakt chtělo.
We're very aware of the feedback. We just don't have a change to make at the stage, and we don't want to make like small changes that don't really fix the problem or whatever.
Gotcha. Malinov asks, is there a fix for group Maven witnesses and invitations? Changes to sinking progression, nerfs to 6 players earning progression, etc.
Don't think so. We'll look into it.
Yeah, so there's like a few questions around the idea of like multiplayer Atlas progression. Having done quite a bit of that now, there's
řekl bych, že můj delf 1213 začne být fakt dobrý.
I think it's kind of just stuff that needs to be looked into across the board.
This is prompting some conversation with the designers, so we'll make sure that we look into that and have a look.
Nezapomeňte, pokud jste tady a máte linknutý Twitch z Path of Exile, když napíše vykřičník drops, tak je tam druhý odkaz a tam na ten musíte zmáčknout, abyste si ty křídla vyzvedli. A po, řekl bych, nějakých 2 minutách se vám to ukáže ve hře.
Mbu asks, can you ask? I will. Is that all? Will fractured items get a similar treatment like split items? Can you 5-to-1 vendor fractured items for clean bases? I guess that might also apply to split bases too.
Oh, so one of the team members has just clarified that there's a change for the Uncharted Realms invitation. Only the map owner gets the witness rather than everyone in the party. That's in 3.14. And someone else says we're changing so the capture of bosses in Uncharted Realms isn't shared. It's only the owner. Right, okay, fair enough. So that's one change there.
Okay.
With regard to the fracturing bases, I don't know of any changes there.
Zjednodušeně řečeno, nebude možný zneužívat lidi, co mají strašně silný buildy, aby měli jeden uživatel 6 postav ve hře a získat 106násobný rewardy potom tím, že může zahrát 6 invitation. To je super změna. Super změna. Že to hodně rozbíjelo ekonomiku. To je fakt dobrý.
Sekna asks, what are your thoughts on migrating hardcore leagues to SC leagues to encourage people to try out hardcore?
This is one of those things that sounds really good at face value, right? Like, I'm a hardcore player, and I would absolutely love it if I can just keep playing in the equivalent standard league. But historically, the reasons why we didn't do this was that we felt it would be demoralizing for you to be playing standard, taking it seriously. And by standard, I mean the standard current challenge league, taking it real seriously. And then some hardcore player appears above you on the ladder, super angry that he's now in your trash pool of a league, blah, 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 blah. You see? And maybe that's just a psychological thing, but that's the reason why we had it so it goes to real hardcore, so real standard when a hardcore character dies. There's also the thing where hardcore is meant to be impactful. Like back in the day in traditional action RPGs, when you die in hardcore, you lose your character, just gone. You can't log in, right? Here we have it so you can keep a shrine to your character in Standard League. And I get it, that's basically useless for a lot of players. They're never going to actually go and play that character in Standard. But there is meant to be a consequence to death. And I kind of feel that the type of player who would start to play hardcore because Standard Challenge League is their fallback plan is probably not the type of player with the temperament to really enjoy hardcore for what it is. And so I don't think we're going to change that in the near future. But yeah, it sounds good at face value.
Envious and myself coincidentally ask any updates on racing, community events, and things like race seasons and stuff like that. If you didn't know, people, there was Path of Exile was featured on GDQ recently for the first time.
A Britlný říkala, že udělá 5týdenní.
Yeah, congratulations, Tai-Tai, that was awesome. In terms of racing updates, we're just slowly working towards our goal of having a integrated race system, and we're trying hard to support community events. If you're running a large-scale community event, you know to get in contact with Bex and the community team to try to arrange some stuff. And so, racing is important to us. I know I said at XOCON that 2020 would be the year of racing, and then that got shut down by a number of external factors. So we're trying to support it as much as we can, but we haven't yet got spare development resources to put a lot of push into the racing stuff. Hopefully soon, we'll begin to be able to roll out some improvements, though.
I'm going to start a custom now where every one of these Q&As I ask, is there going to be any word on Path of Exile Royale?
One day. Ask me again in the next one.
Okay, I will.
I know, because you just said you would.
Že by byl set unveiled rare modů Recept of Unveiled Cost? To vůbec není...
We never patch no those.
To vůbec není špatný. To určitě možný.
Among all the other things.
I saw that. You got the vendor recipe wrong. You clicked accept on the wrong vendor recipe, by the way, it didn't work. Just saying.
4 people have tried it already.
A teoreticky, když to bude, ať to bude to 74 nebo výš, a dostaneš 2. Něco jako, to bude 79 a výš, dostaneš 3. To by mě nepřekvapilo. Ale jako upřímně řečeno, já si nemyslím, že by to bylo moc silný, že? Protože na to, abys na chaos spamoval něco, co bude fakt dobrý, a k tomu jeden unveil, tak jich budeš potřebovat stovky. Takhle, tohle to jako vypnem. Dozvěděli jsme se pár nových informací a kouknem na to uvedení tohleto. Path of Exile.com/Ultimatum. To je trailer, to jsme viděli. Ultimatum. Jenom zajímá, jak se jmenuje tady ten týpek. New Skill Gem. Ne, tak tam je jenom obecný. Je ten Trials of Chaos. Chaos s velkým Ch. No, behalf the entity only known as Chaos. Nebo je tenhle ten, já s tím nesouhlasím, že jsou tady opakujou slova, je to týpek, který se jmenuje Chaos. Potom existují fractured mody a fractured fossily. Neboli existuje pojem fracturenout něco a nevíte, jestli to znamená splitnout předmět fractured fossilou, nebo splitnout, že jo, mirrornout jakoby. A nebo jestli to znamená locknout mod. To není dobrý. Takže tady vidíme tohleto, to je jasný. Tak, a tady mám otevřený screenshoty. Takže screenshot číslo 1. Ano, neboli tohleto je velmi podobný, jako je teďko Ritual Liga. To znamená, existuje tady nějaký okruh, ve kterém musíte být, aby docházelo k tomu souboji. Když z něj vyskočíte, tak předpokládám, že vám to bude třeba 5 sekund počítat. Když jste 5 sekund mimo to, tak vám to dá asi jako, že jste to prohráli. Tak, to je jeden obrázek, nic jiného tady nevidíme speciálně, ne, tohle to nevím co. Taky nevím co je, to je jedno. Jinak, Stone Circles Conquered, co to znamená? Stone Circle. A jo, tohle to jsou asi nějaký Stone Circle. Takže, že by v nich se vyvolávaly ty monstři, asi něco takového. Neboli budete mít přehled, jak daleko tam jste v tom jednom levelu a zavří. Dále, tohle už jsme taky v zásadě viděli. Zrovna ho něco zranilo. Tam zde úplně vidět, že otevřete user interface a něco vás v tu chvíli zraní. A nemůžete s tím nic dělat, protože tam nevidíte. Mimochodem, tady ani nevidím tlačítko na jako křížek. To znamená, že pokud v tenhle ten okamžik není zastavený čas a něco na vás furt útočí, jakož ten vypadá, že útočí, tak vás to může zabít během toho, co tam vidíte tohle. Totem of Costly Might, takže tohle to jsou an invulnerable totem appear in allies and enemies with speed. Aha, benefit causes them to take physical damage over time. No, neboli tady tohle to budou asi nějaký jako modifikátory, které můžou být i výhodný, i nevýhodný. A tady to, co je pod tím, co moc nevidíme, tak to budou asi ty věci, které jsou pro nás vždycky nevýhodný. A tohle to vypadá co? Tady jsou nějaký Chicken Invaders spojený elektrikou. No a jinak tady vidíme, že momentálně hrajeme o nějaký, já nevím, prsten nebo co to je, nebo nějaký Steel Circlet. Takže tady taky user interface žádný speciální není. Ale vypadá to jinak? Vypadá to jinak, vidíte to? Tadyhle se takhle socha. Zatímco tady je týpek se svíčkou. Nevím, jestli to bude něco znamenat. Bum bum, tam se koukám za chviličku. Double or nothing, no to jsou tyhle ty ultimáta. A já si myslím, že tam bude fakt problém ten, že kdo se na tu sílu dostane hodně brzo, ale ono toho nebude moc na trhu, že jo. Ze začátku, řekl bych, že ze začátku ty ceny budou velký rozdíl. To znamená, jestliže bude něco, co vám zdvojnásobí jeden Exile, tak pravděpodobně si to koupíte někde blízko Exaltu. No, já bych, že tak to bude asi většinu doby. A potom půjde o to, jak moc je... je možný to dělat rychle. Aby dejme tomu, i když tam budete mít malou marži, tak když ji uděláte 100 za hodinu, tak teoreticky to bude slušný chaosy za hodinu. Ale na druhou stranu to budete muset kupovat. Neboli tyjo, já tohleto moc nevidím, já bych řekl... Na druhou stranu to možná nebude tak špatný, že jo. Prostě to najdete. Bude to takovej ten, stojí 5 exaltů, můžete zdablit na 10, no tak to prodáte za 4,5 exaltů. Protože aspoň nebudete nic riskovat. A ten týpek, který má dostatečně silnou postavu na to, aby to porazil s jistotou, tak ten si to může za ten půl exalt profitu koupit. Tak, když se koukne na tohle, takže co je tohle? Ultimatum. Nebo to budou nějaký speciální nový arény. A vypadá to, že tam je vždycky hodně těch nepříjemných věcí. Takový ty na špičku postavený čtverce, to jsou ty nevýhody. Takže tam se jenom aréna. Monster Slain. Tam to bylo nějaký Stone Rings, ne? Ble, Monster Slain. Takže tady to nevypadá vůbec nějak speciálně. Prostě chaosová soška. Tady jsou nějaký uniky, jasný. Ultimatum, Val Reliquary. Neboli věci, které jsou nějakým způsobem spojený s Válem. Neboli buď Aciry, nebo Temple of Axolotl, nebo Vál ruiny v Delvu. A možná ještě nějaké další věci, které mají na sobě nějaký lore věty. Spodní. No, exchange blood for power. Jasně, to jsou ty nový skilly, ty ani moc řešit nebudu. Možná to bude dobrý. Jsem úplně proti tomu, aby existoval Orb of Binding. Jediný, kde to dá, jo takhle. No tak to je možná ono. Jako jediný, kde tohle to dává smysl, je během příběhu. Jinak bych Orb of Binding vyhodil ze hry. To je úplně zbytečná věc. V příběhu to dává smysl. Novej ring base a říkali i něco o nějakým Energy Shield Recharge amuletu, pokud se nemýlím. A World Chaos, including that can only be used on either. Škoda, že tady neexistuje třeba šance, že tam těch World modifierů může být víc. Buff the core draw pool, valuable items to find from any content path of Exile. Core draw pool with new currency, league specific uniques. Selection, já bych řekl asi většina. New Atlas bases, Act bosses. Reward improvements 2. Jo, nějaký, tohleto je Labyrinth specific shield. To je super, že můžeme vybírat ty enchanty, to je fakt dobrý. Bude to mnohem dostupnější především pro SSF. A no, to bude fakt lepší. Tím pádem taky basey se správným enchantem budou mnohem levnější, protože když si budete moct vybrat, v zásadě budete vybírat vždycky z trojnásobku a pravděpodobně je to tak, že nejdřív zjistíte, co můžete enchantnout a potom tam dáte tu helmu. Takže když něco bude vhodný na té bone helmě, dáte tam bone helmu, když ne, dáte to na hybris circle, nebo něco v tomhle smyslu. Emperor's Jewels, jasně. Reward Improvements z Katariny. To, že to může zlepšit na tier 4, to je zajímavý. Katarina vypadá takhle, jo. To je nějaký úplně nový model, jsem v životě neviděl. Reward Improvements. Takže co tady vidím? Edit Chaos with Bow Attacks. Ten je brutálně vysoký. Life je normální roll. Accuracy bych řekl, že ten je spíš normální. Možná maleličko zvednutý, ale ten Flat Chaos, ten je 4násobný. Avoid Bleeding, nevím, jestli tam mohl být, možná, že ne. Ale to je celkem oprdu. Ale je takhle, ono teoreticky, když si poskládáte 100% Avoid Bleeding, tak jste imunní na Corrupted Blood. No to není, jako není to výhra, ale je to bonus. Je tam hodně velký flat chaos. Unique Abyss, to je guildy, to dává 2 abyssy, spawn 50% increased monsters. Essence of Delirium, to teda asi zvedlo čísla. Čeká. Hexes you inflict have plus 5 maximum doom. Počkat, není to nový? To teďko není ve hře, ne? Reward improvements 5, 6. No a tohle je naprosto super. Tohle je především na to, že si můžete tradovat double corrupty. Jako, to je hlavní věc. Ostatní věci jsou celkem úplně jedno. Nějaký nový inkubátory. Inkubátory jsou za mě věc, která by byla možná úplně vyhodit z té hry. Taková je zbytečná. Nový katalysty jsou dobrý. Blighted Guild. Area Consent Blight. Blight an additional Blight boss. 50% for Blight chest to contain additional reward. Ne. Tohle to je, že kvantita na mapě ovlivňuje i Blight chesty. Super. Protože doteďka všichni hráli Blighted mapy bílý, protože proč by hráli jiný? A tohleto... Myslíte si, že tohleto bude tier nad Golden Oilem? A nebo že to bude úplně mimo tu řadu? Jakože jestli jste schopný upgradenout například v Harvestu Golden Oil na ten červený oil? A nebo ne? Can be combined with other oils at Cassia to enchant. Corrupted rings, amulets or blighted maps. Corrupted rings, amulets or blighted maps. Hodně zajímavý. Reward improvements, další. A to je Ancillary Balance, second trailer. Jasně. Path of Exile 2 mě zas tak nebere. Takže já se kouknu na ten Ultimatum ještě. Kouknu na to na celý asi. A zajímá mě nejvíc ten souboj někde ke konci, kde on vyleze, bude velký a budete proti němu evidentně bojovat. Já mám takový podezření, že to by mohl být vždycky závěr toho 10. kola. Že 10. kolo by mohlo být, bojujete proti tady chaosovi. Jo, takhle. Ono tam probíhá souboj a během toho on freezne čas. Neboli jak jsme tam před nějakou chvílí viděli, že na nás útočí a že jsem trošku zraněný. A byl ten user interface, že si máme vybrat, tak v tu chvíli nás to teda nemůže zabít, protože to vypadá, že skutečně je freeznutý čas. Mimochodem, pokud tak skutečně funguje, tak to by mohla být zajímavá technologie na to, že když otevřete například Betrayal board, že to taky bude freeznutý čas, to by fakt chtěl. Počkat, kouknu, kolikátej byl tohleto. Takže v třetí vlně dostal Exile, to je trošku absurdní. Tady se to unfazelo. Monster Slain, počkat, tak ještě jednou zpátky. Sledujte takovej ten progress bar, co je dole, jak strašně rychle proběhne. Takže to možná nebude zas tak hrozně špatný zdržování. To vypadá, že je fakt rychlý. Vidíte? To je nějaký 3 rány nebo něco takového. Current reward. Počkat, to vypadá jako, že nějaký něco jiného, ne? Předtím jsme vybrali Exile. Defeat waves of monsters. Co znamená tohle ikonka? Escalating monsters get farther the longer they remain alive. Faster. Jinak řečeno, to je zase čistě damage check. Survival duration. Aha, tak tady možná, že někde bylo defeat monsters, zatímco tady bude přežij. Takže dejme tomu, tady budou nějaký pasti na zemi nebo něco takového. To je zajímavý. Takže nebude v každém tom trialu stejná výzva typu útočí na tebe monstři, všechny je zabij. Možná. Tady zase je survival. Survival. Monster slain. Takže skutečně jsou tam jiný cíle. 8 new gems. Co je tohle za ukázku? Schválně se na to kouknu na první pohled. To nevypadá. Core drop pool. Rewards core drop pool. To je asi to, co pravděpodobně... Tam totiž byly ještě informace o tom, jak ty truhličky, k tomu se ještě taky vrátím. To bylo tuším u toho Path of Exile 2 ukázaný. A tohle to jinak možná bude o těch League Specific unikách. Jinak se koukněte na ty stacky, jo. Pokud to bude tak, že běžný stack je tady 400 a běžný stack je tady 6. A tohle to by také bylo 6 nebo 4? 4. Takže tato currency možná nebude úplně vzácná. Reward vendor recipes. Reward. Labyrinth. Velmoc. Catalyst. Jewels. Essence. To je super, je to super Blight. Breach. Perandus. Incursion. Atlas based stuff. Acery, Incubators, Beastery, much more. To je ono. Tohleto už jsme viděli, že to je to ultimátum, jak se Inscribed Ultimatum nebo tak. To znamená takový to double or nothing. A tady teď uvidíte, že on se vytvoří a jakoby vyroste. Ne, to je tak, když se na to kouknu, tak tam byl podle mě přechod mezi těma videama. Že to není stejná aréna. Tohle vypadá čtvercová. Tam ta vypadala zubatě, nějaký polygon špatně. No, na druhou stranu možná, že se ta aréna předělává. Ne, to vypadá, že něco jiného. To vypadá, že je jiná oblast. No, tam to je on. Vypadá hodně velký. A má nějakou zajímavou zbraň. Vidíte to? Takové jakože kopí nebo něco takového. A tam to vypadá, že od něj poteče krev. Jasně, takže tam to má být nějaký obětační oltář. Podívejte se na film Blade. Ultimatum chaos. Takže to jsme zanalyzovali. A teda mě teďko aspoň zajímá. Myslím, že to bylo tady, ne? V tom Path of Exile. To je ono? Bylo to v tomhle nebo ne? Ne, to vypadá, že tady to není. To bych se asi musel podívat na záznam celého toho streamu, ale v nějakou chvíli tam mluvili právě o tom, že předělali ty rewardy, co padají z truhliček a normálně na zemi. A to je jediná věc, kterou jsem úplně nezastihnul přesně. A jako předpokládejme, že bude padat méně věcí a to stačí. Dobrý, já jsem spokojený. Plánuju Ultimatum ligu streamovat, ale tento zaprvé má to být příští týden, neboli 16.4.2021. A plánuju ji streamovat tentokrát ne od začátku ligy, neboli od někdy 9-10 v noci, ale vyspím se a začnu streamovat někdy dopoledne. Jakože nevím, jestli se hecnu a vstanu v 8 nebo v 9 nebo něco takového. Budu streamovat od rána do večera, v neděli od rána do večera, něco takového. Já doufám, že jak takhle budu trošičku rozumět, srovnaný v čase, že to půjde. Ale na druhou stranu nemůžu to úplně zaručit, je možný, že budu strašně nadšený a začnu streamovat někdy v noci. Ale fakt nevím a tentokrát si myslím, že fakt to bude spíš sobota od rána. Aspoň si tím vyzkouším nový systém. Myslím, že to bude jednodušší, protože už bude víc věcí na trhu. Nebude to tak, že každá blbost, každý unik, co chci, stojí 1 až 2 chaosy, ale už v tu chvíli po těch nějakých 6 hodinách to budou bezcenné věci, kterých na trhu plná a za Alchy si to moc koupit. Tak, já vám děkuji za pozornost a uvidíme se příště. Tak s tím.